Good evening, hello, and welcome to another Andy Maps Kalegen for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4. My mic appears to have gone off, so if anybody can't hear me, can you ping me now so I can make sure that this is working correctly? Is my mic working? Just double check that that's going well. Nobody said that it hasn't, so I'm going to presume that all is fine. Right, so assuming that, yes, you can hear me. Marvelous. If there's any issues with the sound, do tell me, because I'm getting little pings here that saying that my mic aren't quite working. So, given everything appears to be working well, let's get diving in straight away. For those of you who don't know, my name's Andy Law. I am the one-time producer, developer, writer for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4. I've been working on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay since pretty much I can remember. You might know my work quite a lot through the course of 2nd edition, where I did all the cartography, wrote for around about half the books. I also worked on various other bits and pieces across the role-playing world, including maps for Critical Role, or Call of Cthulhu, or writing for various games. I get about. At the moment, we are mapping for... we're on like a 15-second delay. I'm just going to double-check that that's the case. Am I coming through right? If there's any issues, I'm happy to restart. I will... be mapping today, Kalegen, for those of you who've been following this. Kalegen is a city in the Reikland that is an important centre for diplomatic, let's say, concerns, given that it is in the lands for the High Lord Ambassador for the Reikland, and he uses this city for a variety of different reasons. You might know this character because he pops up a couple of times in The Enemy Within. He is not necessarily how I would have pitched him, but that's the whole point of playing Warhammer. You'll play your characters in different ways. The character was first introduced strongly inside the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay core book, where I added him into the council that runs the Reikland. So, assuming that all is well, and I do hope that all is well, I'm going to bring up the map where it currently stands. As is the case from our previous streams, we're going to be taking suggestions as we go along. So if you've got any ideas for what we're mapping, please drop them down as comments. I won't be able to watch all the comments as they're coming in, because clearly I'm going to be sitting down here on my big screen mapping. So I will stop approximately once every 5-10 minutes or so as I work my way through the various districts, and we will discuss everything you popped up on screen. If you've got any just general comments or questions about how the map is being created, feel free to ask. And if there's anything at all beyond that, again, feel free to ask. Our streams are somewhat known for their tangents. I'm quite happy to discuss them, but I will this time do my very best to try and make sure that if we are going off on a tangential discussion about things that aren't necessarily related to Kalegen, I'll make sure I'll get some of the mapping down as well, because last week I was, let's say, somewhat discombobulated, and we went off on quite a few tangents about a variety of different things, particularly including the game that we've got coming up, because we're going to be over on the Lawhammer Discord running through the entirety of The Enemy Within as an actual play, and I'm beyond excited to be doing that. So unsurprisingly, I got a little bit chatty about it. Right, so first thing I need to do is bring up my screen where we've got our map. Let me just quickly share that. I jumped straight in on this one, so let me just bring that up. Share. Normally I have that already, but I just jumped over. I was, just before the stream started, working on the big wrecked great ship. Putting a little bit of detail, because last week we decided approximately where it was going to go, but we hadn't yet put any detail in beyond a quick scribble that I put into place. I'll probably break it up a little bit more, because at the moment it looks a little bitty firm. I'll take some bits off and move them around. But that's not something that's necessarily a lot of fun to do during the stream. The chat about all the different districts and exactly how they should be presented is what I'm going to focus on today. So I will hide that little bit there and check if there's any comments. Let's run through. Yalib opens with a hello. Delighted that you made it in, Yalib. You were missed last week. Alexander says hi. Add hello to you in return. The bloke person, good to see you, bloke person. Hello. I'm delighted that you're here. Benjamin, good to see that you're here as well. Moving down, Yalib says the kind of music is so common at a regular. It is nice, isn't it? Was it at regular speed? Was it not running at regular speed in another stream? Just out of curiosity. Alexander says that we can't hear you. Good to hear that. In fact, there's quite a few comments saying largely the same thing there. And on the 15-second delay, Yalib says it Good. No delay in mind for asking questions. Excellent. And please form not like you to drop in your tangent suggestions. Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Alexander says, 200 characters are still not enough. They certainly aren't. So good luck with trying to get all your comments in as we go. So if I pull out on the map, there's a couple of things that I'm going to say. For those of you who don't know already, oh, I've got the ad up from last time. Let me just get rid of that. For those of you who don't know already, Kalegen is a city that lies quite close to Altdorf. The reason I say city is because in my version of the Warhammer world, any Reikland town that's got a high temple of Sigmar, that's a temple that oversees several other temples of Sigmar, is called a city. Any town, well, any settlement, that'd be better, that has got at least two temples of Sigmar is referred to as a town. Any settlement with a single and only a single temple of Sigmar is a village. And if it doesn't have a temple of Sigmar, say a shrine or something similar, it is counted as a hamlet. That is only in my world for the Reikland. Each of the Grand Provinces have got different ways of designating these things, if indeed they have a formal method of designating these things. We can possibly go into that in detail if anyone's ever interested in those sort of things. I'll probably do that over on the Discord, though, so that we can have a good wee, I don't know, chat about how the Empire is built, or at least how my version of the Empire is built. Okay, so Kalegen is a city that's in the Reikland. It's not too far away. If you're thinking of ideas and how it can work, we've already established, not to go into any great detail for those of you who have missed the previous 5 streams, I think now. We've already established several close relations with Karaberg to the north up there. Obviously with Altdorf, where the Holzkrugs used to rule all of Reikland. At one point, the Holzkrugs in the past were the emperors, just before the coming of Magnus, in fact. And then Magnus the Pious comes along, kicks everybody in, and let's say everything changes for the good old princedom. And that includes the, well, poor old House Holzkrug. They did not fare too well after this. Holzkrug, the Duchy of Holzkrug, which is in this part of the princedom of Reikland, is over here, and Kalegen is the largest town inside, well, largest city, I suppose, inside that duchy. It has relatively close relations with everybody, and it has foreign dignitaries from across the world and across the old world that visit the place, because the ambassador for not just the Reikland, but the ambassador for various other places is housed here. This is where they stay when they're not in Altdorf. So that's a very quick beginning. I'll get rid of my reference map so that it doesn't get in the way as we're doing our mapping. When we were last mapping before, we had organized, much to Yalub's horror, some old style warehousing, and he was horrified because he needs a road to be running underneath here for the towpath, because many of the barges, unlike the barges that you'll find making their way up and down the Reich, which are very like Thames barges, if you're aware of real world barge types, these are sailed and they don't require any, well, pulling. They don't require horses to get down from A to B because of the very nature of the way the vessels are constructed and just how wide the rivers are in the Empire. The vast majority of the Reich River system is entirely navigable, even by seagoing vessels. And whilst it may be blocked off at Altdorf and bridges are put in place to stop any ships going any further than Altdorf, warships, for example, the water is still deep enough all the way up to Talabheim, all the way up to Null. And the rivers are so wide at points that you can sail it almost like it's the sea. And most of the barges that ply the Reich, barges that were at one point referred to as Reichaks, there's various other barge types that have been mentioned in various editions of Warhammer. The second edition, for example, had some fairly strong details for the Reichaks, which were originally built down in Marienburg. Large barges that work in a particular way. So, Yalub's concern there, I think, is not necessarily one, because as we all know, one of the great joys of Warhammer buildings is that we can have cut-ins, so to speak. So we can still have a towpath cutting in along this side without one being there where it can be flush to the edge of the canal. So we don't actually need to change the map per se and still get our towpaths in place. Or alternatively, you can just look at it as a far more realistic way. They could just punt this section here if we wanted to do so. And I'm quite happy for everybody to talk this one out as to what they think is the better option. I personally think that punting for what is, if I bring up the scale, I don't even need to bring up the scale, it's approximately 80 to 100 yards, something like that. It's about 120 yards, in fact. So it's a relatively long distance. But punting is a very common way to push along, particularly if you've got yourself a setup along these barges for yanking, pulling, or whatever. It isn't ideal, though. I think I would still rather have our horses in place. We're going to probably need, if we did do that, we'd need to have somewhere to stable horses, mules, or whatever it is that they're using. It could be oxen to pull down the barges from the higher locks and up into the mines that are inside the Herzog. Oh, can't remember the name of the mountain range up there off the top of my head, but there's a mountain range up there which holds the vast majority of the wealth of House Holzkrug. So we could easily just change the description of the buildings themselves and have a towpath running underneath, or alternatively, we can purposely set it up so that there's a difficulty, an actual stop. And if we do that, we might want to consider as well dropping some extra pools for barges to effectively park in, to be offloaded and then move back up the canal system when they go up there. So definitely something to consider. But we finished off this section. In this section here, there were some new locations added. I'll admit in our last stream, some of the locations didn't have all their details pinned down. I think we'll probably pin those down over in Discord as we break down all of the individual districts for this city and we discuss each of the locations. When we transfer these locations over to World Anvil, and for those of you who don't know what World Anvil is, go check it up right now, because World Anvil is awesome. We're going to be popping up every single detail we create for this up onto World Anvil. And when we do that, we'll probably be making each of the locations somewhat similar to how I wrote the locations for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set. In that, we'll have a paragraph describing the location, a paragraph describing who lives there or who uses it, and then probably two adventure hooks at least for each one, which will discuss any potential secrets or how that individual area can be used. We might split off the adventure hooks and make them so that they're hidden, so that only people who click through can see them, allowing the place to be open for GMs to use with their players. We can discuss that later. World Anvil is a particularly versatile piece of software, so we can sort that out according to what everybody else thinks is best. Alrighty, so the general aim before we moved into the stream was to try and finish everything that was sitting inside the old walls of Kalegen when it was going through its first expansion. And the old walls, which are actually quite hard to see here, and I think I'm going to mark them out differently because of that. As the map moves into place, certain things are becoming more and more evident, and one is that you can't quite see. In fact, that's not the right color. Let me just pull that back up. There we go. The old wall runs down this way all the way around here. The city expanded significantly further later. I'm just scribbling rightly on top of my map, which is never a wise idea, but I accidentally save it. Let's just get rid of that. But the old wall's working there. We've gone across it in a few places as various discussions have been had during our previous streams. We've added the location for Knightly Order over here. We've got a half-built temple of Verena here and a Verenan orphanage sitting down there. And as we go further up here past the old wall on this side, we've got a particularly large sprawling inn. However, I think sticking inside that wall as a general idea is not a bad idea. If we do that, we've got loosely 3 areas that we need to organize. I'd say 4 actually, and I'm quite happy to take your ideas as to which one we should dive into next. So if you've got a preference, drop them in the comments. I'll go through each one of them in turn. First is a shipbuilding area. This area is building now wolf ships, largely for Karaberg. Occasionally they're taking commissions from Altdorf, but Altdorf has a certain pride about building the Imperial First Fleet without assistance. Having said that, though, the Duchy of Holzkrug is within the Princedom of Altdorf, and because it's within the Princedom, there are those amongst the Admiralty Board that see anything that's built in Kalegen as effectively being built in Altdorf anyway. So there are a few commissions heading their way upstream to Altdorf, but the majority of them are going down to Karaberg, and that's going to cause a certain amount of tension between the Middenlanders who are sited in Karaberg. And if you're playing it anyway within time, Karaberg is a provincial capital. It's as important as Altdorf, besides the fact it doesn't have the emperor in it, but many would see the emperor as a secondary figure to an elector count, depending upon exactly how one views these things. And the Bildhofens, that's the family of Magnus the Pious from 200 years ago when he reformed the empire together, rule there. If you're playing past the enemy within, it's very likely that Karaberg is no longer a capital, and the capital has been relocated from Karaberg all the way up to Middenheim, which is really far away, meaning that Karaberg, for all that it's been separated, is still individually a very powerful city and is looking to build its second fleet. Now, if you've ever looked at the old Shades of Empire book, that was for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. It goes into some depth about the different fleets that are being built within the Empire. Officially, it has 2 fleets, the Empire First Fleet in the Reikland and the Empire Second Fleet up in Nordland. However, there are a couple of somewhat unofficial fleets with their own sea lords, one of which is working out of Karaberg. And this map here is going to be showing how some of those ships was built before it properly formalized a little bit later in the 2520s. So this is the first steps towards the shipbuilding that we're going to have moving up towards Karaberg. So that's a shipbuilding area and what is required for that. And again, if anyone has any ideas for that, drop them in. The next is a loose trade section sitting near the front docks here. So we're going to move away from all of the warehouses and open areas where goods can be stocked and going a little bit more deeply into shops and merchant halls and similar. We have the primary merchant hall sitting across the river over there with a road, a swing bridge sitting over here. The bridge swings backwards and forwards as it's required, generally only used when VIPs are coming in through the next major section, the port, for want of a better word, where dignitaries arrive. This place is spick and span and somewhat rare for the Warhammer world in general. Very clean in appearance, for all obviously inevitably hides rot beneath the surface. It's got these little grey boxes which are yet to be drawn. These are proper big forts with cannons sticking out of them all over the place. And they're to be drawn as well. They're to effectively awe and inspire anybody that makes their way into this place so that imperial might, and particularly the might of the local ruling family, which is the Hallskrugs, can be shown off. So we've got that there. We've got the main jetty that's sticking out. Probably a pier, not a jetty, that we need to consider how long it should be. It needs to be at least big enough to take potentially a wolf ship, because wolf ships are often used as diplomatic vessels as well. They're large second-rate ships of the line in the Empire Navy. So we need relatively big dock there to consider. So that's that one. All the road that leads along here and up here has been relatively carefully manicured as well. So if any of this detail on this section should probably have some trees, if there's anything a little bit ugly hiding on the other side of it, in an attempt to hide the fact that the town isn't quite necessarily as pristine as everybody expects. And that being both sides, particularly given that just over here, we have a particularly large slum where most of the workers from the docks, the cheap laborers are housed. The second slum is over here, but this is a middle-class area that turned into a slum. So this area here has a mixture of middle-class and very lower-class people living in it, where this section here is 100% slum. The last area to consider is that green shaded area kicking around here. That green shaded area, in fact, there's 2 more areas I'm going to do. This area and this section here, where we've got the square. The green shaded area is warehouses, and this is stock in general, where we're going to be dropping off trade goods coming in, trade goods going out. Is probably the main warehouse area for the primary trade for the town. It's slightly separated from the ores and all of the primary minerals that are being taken down from the mines, much of which will be dropping off in this general area over here. This is mostly for external stuff and almost certainly includes everything that's required for shipbuilding. They're probably going to be receiving some cannons, metalwork, and similar here. So we're going to be getting shipments from, assuming that the Karaberg connection is strong, perhaps shipments from Schmiedorf. Schmiedorf is the primary cannon factory, if you will, of Middenland. That's on the river Tallebeck, past Altdorf, and Schmiedorf could easily be channeling cannons down from there. Their cannons are generally seen to be significantly inferior to Nuln cannons. Having said that, though, there's a certain level of Middenland pride in having Middenland weapons on a Middenland vessel. So there's definitely going to be trade with Schmiedorf to bring in the cannon that's required and what other weapons that we choose, whether they're bombards or whatever. On top of that as well, the actual iron is probably part of the deal because they've got iron sitting up in the mountains, and that can be transferred out and they shipped over to Schmiedorf. I imagine the taxes that they pass through Altdorf for that are extortionate. There'll be almost certainly some form of smuggling going on at points where the traders in concern will try to get the iron through without having to pay all of the enormous amount of tax to get it through the city. So there's that area. That's our warehouses. And then finally, we've got this section here, which is the primary market for most of the goods that are coming from the south. In particular, just outside the old city walls, we have a large flesh market. This is where all the local farmers, all the local agricultural folks take all their animals to sell off. There's going to be pens. There's going to be a large building where the cows or the sheep or whatever are trooped around and can be sold and bid upon by individual farmers for animals to go to stud or to be bred or whatever else. Perhaps if they want to get rid of a flock, pass on a flock. There's going to be a tannery sitting close to this as well. There'll be a butcher on the inside, almost certainly, possibly on the outside too. So there's all manner of cool little bits and pieces on the outside of the walls, but that influences this area here, which is going to be, again, somewhat similar to the trade area up here. We're going to have shops, but these are going to be more domestic shops. We're also going to have potentially shops that are going to be useful for folks that are leaving town. So we'll be looking for your classic adventurers type shop where they can get goods like ropes and grapples and general ironmongery that they may require to go delve some ancient dwarf tomb or whatever it is that your PCs happen to be doing. So that's potentially the sort of locations there. So I'm going to jump into the comments in just a moment, but if you've got a preference for where I go, now is the time to mention it, and I will decide the second I've run through all of these comments. If nobody has made a decision, I will just go for the path of least resistance and then just work down into one of them, whichever one takes my fancy first. So let's have a quick look at our comments. Where do we start? We have, well, I've got loads of comments. I've got to go quite back a little bit here. Right, so Josie starts. Hi, Joe. Glad to see that you're out there. I want to watch the master work. I do approve of that. Somebody called me master. You may note her last name is the same as mine. That is my daughter, who's currently studying games design, not here, dialing in to listen to her dad. Oh, I feel it in my chest. Moving down, Yalab says, I've been rewatching streams at speed, so I'm used to I understand. That's why the countdown sounds particularly sedate. It is indeed the intern extraordinaire. Hi, Josie. Josie actually recently composed some music for some of the things that we're doing over in the Rookery, pardon me. And my other daughter sang it, and it's absolutely awesome. Alexander asked, what's the definition of a city outside the Reikland? It changes for each of the grand provinces. In my world, each of the grand provinces has an answer. I'd rather not get caught up in that too much just now, though, because I'll go off in one for half an hour. But yes, I have very strong opinions is the wrong word, but I've got very established opinions because I've been playing in the Warhammer world since the game was very first published. And through the course of that, I have built a very real sense of what the Empire is and how it works. Inevitably, that'll be my sense. That'll be the Lawhammer version, not the Warhammer version. That's the whole point of why we call things Lawhammer. But your version could be inevitably very different. And it's about picking and choosing what works best for your game. I'll go into that, though, I think probably in another stream. The bloke person says, I've just finished watching the last video. Delighted to hear that. And I really like the semi-sunk great ship. I mean, pinched that idea from Musalon. It's a really good idea from Musalon. Musalon was one of the first maps that I did for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And it's awful. I hate it. It was done entirely with a mouse because my pad broke. And it's why I hate it. I don't know if you've ever tried to draw with a mouse, but it's not good. It's really, really just not good. So yeah, if you do check out the old second edition Musalon map, you can just think of me clicking away with my mouse going Josie says, hi Ali, good to hear. Mark says, hello all, I'm glad to see you here. Boonjam. I'm going to go Boonjam rather than Boonyam. Boonjam, how do you spell that boat thing? Reikak. It's Reikaak, as I recall. That's probably correct. If you want the spelling for it, you're looking for the Life and Death on the Reich article in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Companion for 2nd edition. The Reikland's in there, as is the other primary barge type that's used up and down the Reik. The Reikland is a relatively new development for barges, in that it's relatively seaworthy as well as being riverworthy. It uses a clinker-built system which had been taken from the Norse. It's designed largely down in Marienburg, where the other barges that are used up and down the Reik are a little bit more like the old Thames barges, which are also mentioned in that article. Yalab suggests, yeah, we can fix in the description. Maybe just put a tiny shadow of a road along those buildings. That's in discussion about the warehouses over there, and I think that's not a bad idea. John Smith says, bridges over canals typically have a very particular shape to account for horses pulling barges. You know what? That's a very fair point. And if somebody could get me a reference for that, that would be good, because it'd be nice to reflect that on the map. I will say, if you do get me a reference for it, the links don't share very well on the comments inside YouTube, because YouTube has various filters in place to try and stop people, I don't know, spamming porn or something. I might not be able to get it, but if you could post that over in Discord, and if you ping a message in here saying you have, I will pop Discord up here so that I have it open and ready. So if any link comes up with an example of how that could look, that would be brilliant. Alrighty, Benjamin says, what would also be a nice dark alley along the canal at night where shenanigans happen? Damn straight. And I think loosely, whenever we are creating these locations, it's this sort of detail that makes it all a bit more fun. Always try to think of, what can I do to turn this into a location that I can describe to my PCs, and a location that perhaps in the day looks totally fine, but at night looks completely different. And how we establish those differences, I think, will make quite a big, I mean, it makes the locations more fun, because then when we drop the description in, we can make sure that when we write it up for World Anvil, we include that, and the GMs who read it go, oh, I could do that. I could stage a notorious criminal underworld deal in this particular location at night in the dark when the warehouses are empty. Seems to be a perfect place to do it. So yeah, well up for that. Mark Allen says, phenomenal, the World Anvil scheme. I'm presuming that you're just checking it out for the first time, and it is phenomenal. I do recommend going out and checking World Anvil. It is truly awesome. Yalp says, only slight issue with the shipbuilding zone is that a sneaky dodger pier connects to the island that has no bridge connecting it to the mainland. It's not a massive problem, but worth noting. Actually, that is 100% accurate. We've got ourselves a pier sitting up here that, because of the break between the main pier and the external pier, it can count as not being part of Reikland. And indeed, locally, it's being counted as part of Middenland. There's a whole story we're building for that. And I agree that we potentially have an issue with popping it there. It might be worth reassessing exactly where that particular pier goes and maybe moving it off here instead, and having that section of the pier there, and keeping our primary shipbuilding area, which may cut into here a little bit with it's a potential dry dock or something in there as well. I can't imagine we have the biggest shipbuilding area. They're not going to be building more than 1 or 2 ships at any one point, but maybe more. That's actually quite a large area. We'll bring the scale up so we can have a look at it in a moment. Yeah, that is a very good point, Alan. Alexander suggests maybe warehouses with a fancy front to show the wealth of the city and don't lose storage space near the harbour. That's not a bad idea at all. And Yalab says that square was initially intended to be the flesh market. This setup also makes sense. It was going to be where the and it still is. The flesh market down here is it's the proper market where the business is done. Where this market here is where all the people can buy it. So it's the commercial front to the industry that lies on the outside. So I think that hasn't changed per se. It's just been adapted a little bit as we bridge over that particular wall. And with elevation outside of the wall, probably some defensive structure makes sense. And did I miss a part there? But this with some elevation. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there. If you could clarify that, I probably missed something obvious. Alexander says, I posted a link in Discord with warehouses from the time of the hands. They're oriented other than what you have drawn up to now. I'm going to bring those up right now. And yeah, let me just copy. See, one of the joys of doing it this way is I can just bring that straight in. Look at that. It's like magic. And yes, this one here is warehouses that appear to be that. Now you can see that you've got the main arches there. It's quite possible some of those arches may at one point gone right up to the water as well. But many of those have been bricked up. So the original stores, they probably have a road that was sitting in front there. It's really difficult to tell exactly how that one would have manifested. But yeah, I really quite like the look of that one. Do you have any other ones? Oh, there's a couple of other big ones, buildings here that are quite nice, but they're not warehouses, so I won't pop those up at the moment, although one of them sort of is. Yalb says, a nice line of facades with a narrowish strip of flower garden in front makes sense. Actually, I think that's a good idea. It's very easy to get ourselves some rather pretty buildings, and if we drop details in front of them, they can be, and again, shared by, I think that was Alexander. Thanks very much, Alexander. That gives a strong sense of, so I mean, that building looks lovely and impressive, doesn't it? While simultaneously being a building that's largely about industry. Boone Jam says, okay, fantastic. Sounds right up my alley. We'll check out the companion. Perfect. The article, as I say, is Life and Death on the Reich. And it was written by me, hence me remembering it. It's quite old now. That was written back in 2004. So that makes me feel old. I sent a couple of image links. Thanks very much. And where are they? Are they sitting in general chat by any chance? No. I don't see the image links you've done unless they are image links that I don't know. Oh, look at that. Oh, you have. Look at that. Let's bring that up now so we can take a look at that bridge. Oh, yeah. That's the sort of details. The cycle paths around our way almost look identical to this. I really like that. And I definitely think that that needs to be incorporated in at least one of the bridges to make them look super pretty. Yeah, that'd be well awesome. Let's bring another one of those images from the side since we got a couple of them posted. Thanks very much, John. That's enormously appreciated because I think, well, that looks pretty freaking awesome. Alexander then suggests, or something like the Hanseatic trader houses or city halls. They have some pretty fancy facades. They do that fit well in the Warhammer world. Absolutely agree. And they're the ones that we've been just having a look there. And I think that that's probably the best idea for that area. Just add a nice drawbridge and the pier is not a problem anymore. No, the drawbridge would be an official connection. And by Reikland law, a drawbridge does not cause a break. There is, in this case, a break, but it's only about a foot wide. But it is quite literally a break. You have to step over it. And legally, to cross over with something like a cart or something, you are moving from one grand province to another. And that causes various issues. So they don't bring any carts or anything going across there. It's just people, but they can carry goods over. Where the area there is largely for gambling because of the different rules that sit on the other side. A classic casino style barge, for example. There's a variety of things that we can do, plus some dodgy trading where they're going to be doing tax-free trading there as well. Yalab answers his earlier comment. Elevation defensive structure where you now have the flesh market note seems like a slight elevation due to the shadows. It absolutely is. That probably wants to at least have a palisade. I see what you're saying. Sitting around it and then possibly a route down towards the tannery. Yeah, possibly. I mean, often you find that things just build where they build, and the perfect utility of an area very rarely comes to light. This area here, I'm actually thinking of a large flesh market that I visited, which sits on a slope, and it's not a good place for it. But what it was central, so it meant that it was very easy for all the farmers to gather their goods there. And in this particular case, it exploded and almost tripled its size when trains were connected to the area, and it just spread upwards and upwards across the hill. And it's just a really poor place for a flesh market, but it was convenient when it very first began, and it spread out from there. The area here would have been cleared, if we think back to our timeline, probably around about 20 to 40 years ago. And at that point, we already have ourselves a large defensive fortification up here. So the need for a secondary one, particularly when the walls are already commissioned across here, and they're attempting to avoid going up and down the walls, the hill areas, because that's actually more expensive. They would probably do that and maybe build a single watchtower using the elevation for height. So I think rather than having a broad palisade, which someone would have to build, I think a watchtower and the natural nature of how walls build inside flesh markets, because they have to pen in the animals and channel them from place to place, will provide almost a secondary walled area. But I don't think we necessarily need to have something that's specifically called out to be a palisade. Although I'm quite happy if someone thinks there's a better way of doing that to go with that. Benjamin goes, oh, I get it. Legal shenanigans. Yes, absolutely. 100% legal shenanigans. That's back in reference to our little extra point on the harbour. Basically, they're attempting to avoid tax. And because of the gambling side of it, that's something that is particularly, let's say, I'll get... There's various ways we can tackle this, but loosely, the gambling laws in the Reikland are significantly more stringent than they are in Middenland, because the Reikland has a strong Sigmarite presence, and that Sigmarite presence dials down on anything that could be seen or perceived to be delving into excess. Other gods have got very different views. Renald, as we all know, is a very different view as to exactly what gambling represents, but the Cult of Sigmar is pretty strict, and that has influenced Reikland law right down to its core. Middenland has a completely different view, where individualism is considered to be one of the most important things, and that means that if you want to throw all your money away, you're entirely free to do so, but it would be seen as dishonorable, disrespectful to your family, and something that's very foolish to do. So they have, in many respects, a far more free version of how the various restrictions are put in place over gambling, while simultaneously really disliking Ronaldo as a whole. It's at their core, it's a more Ulrican view of how to deal with things, rather than the Sigmarite view of how to deal with things, where Sigmarites are all about community, support, and restriction, where the Ulricans are all about individual capability and the individual freedoms to do what you wish. The two cults clash frequently because of their different views. And these are views that you could argue are at the very core of many of the conflicts we have in the real world as well, depending on how you want to reflect those into your version of Warhammer. So yes, cut a long story short, they're trying to make the very best out of the freewheeling potential of the looser Middenland laws, which will allow for the dignitaries that are visiting to gamble with almost impunity in comparison to what they would have as an alternative back in Altdorf, where you'd almost certainly have to go to a more seedy area where the gambling was a bit freer, probably run by the Cult of Renald, but also potentially a little bit illegal depending upon the nature of it, and certainly going to be something that's going to be a focus of attention for the Cult of Sigmar. And I think that this location here on the other side of the water will also be a focus of attention for at least one, if not two, members of the Cult of Sigmar inside Kalegen as well. They will be decrying it. There'll probably be a street preacher sitting on the other side saying something along the lines of, "You are damning your souls. The end of the world is coming. We're all burning. Go on, give us a few silver shillings while you're at it." Taking advantage of the flush gamblers as they make their way out. Because you can't go wrong with at least a little bit of double standards. Moving down to Alexander, for all the drunken people might regularly fall into the gap, I can imagine people standing there at night pulling out drunks for a hefty sum. If you're not willing to pay, you'll get beaten. I love that detail. That's great. Let's not lose that detail. I completely agree. That's something that I can see happening. And again, as I recall, we wanted to have it relatively close to where our rich folks could go. So there may even be an argument. I'm not sure where it should go. I agree with Yalib that it probably shouldn't go there now. We definitely have something to consider there. Yeah, and then back into the water. Absolutely. Yeah, I've been going back and forth about the hill for a while now, to be honest, and I don't have a great idea of how to approach it. It just feels like the elevation would have a defensive bit. Yes, I agree. And I think that if we pop ourselves a watchtower, that's probably enough. But this entire area was covered in trees not that long ago. So in many respects, this hill is relatively new, and the natural building, the natural flesh market is expanded into that open space. And regardless of how best it should be used, it's being used this way, because that's what happened. But I do think that a watchtower overlooking the area makes a lot of sense. Having said that, though, you've got to remember that the major fortification is on the largest hill in the area, the second largest being the upper class area up in the north, when that was cut back. There's crags on the other side of that, which makes the entire area particularly defensive, where we don't really have the idea of crags here. We've just got the idea of more of a sort of a hill that goes up and maybe falls down a bit steeper at the other side. A hill that rises up from the riverside, possibly a bunch of rocks around one part or another. But again, I'm quite happy to be guided by everybody else. Like an extensive barbican or something, I don't know. Possibly. I think that's just too much. We're already going to have a large fortification sitting on the edge of the city. I don't think we necessarily need to reinforce that too much, because we have so many city walls. Some of those city walls are going to have towers. I'm not sure a necessary requirement to put yet another one in place unless we've got a story reason for doing so, somebody that was individually keen to build, because these things cost money, which means that somebody at some point has had to have gone, I want to build this here because of the benefit that we get. Now, normally for this instance, it would be the state army. Who was the individual who said, I need this extra tower, this extra defensive point here, rather than just running this wall and doing the cheaper option, or rather than just withdrawing back up to the main fort for the state army that's over to the southeast of the city. We need to have a reason beyond just simply, it's a high point, let's drop a tower on it. Last point, can we put the grid on for a moment? How large is that area? That area is approximately 100 yards along, so it's relatively large. I'm not sure if my grid is set to the correct scale. Let's have a check. Oh, it is. It's about, it is. Each one of these small, I don't know how well you can see those, sadly, because of the nature of the, it's very, I'll actually mark out a 100-yard box so that you can see it. I can barely see it on my screen at this side. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to make it a little bit more clear. There we go. I can see that much more clearly. So that is approximately a 100-yard box. 100 yards to a side, so you're looking around about 80, 90 meters. That's slightly smaller, for example, than the flesh market that in my hometown. It wasn't called a flesh market. It had its own exchange and mart name from Thurso. Thurso had a population of around about 9,000 people, and it's a trading area for animals when trade was still a thing that they did when they moved to the centre, which sort of died out in the 60s, 70s up there. But its one was around about 150 meters in size. So that doesn't seem to be an inappropriate size. There'd be probably just a few pens, but the rest of it will just be open space filled with fences and pens rather than covered houses, because this isn't somewhere where you store your animals. This is somewhere where you're going to be trading your animals, and a lot of the time this area will be largely empty and not used. It will be full as people are bringing in their various crops at various trade times. Their various agricultural goods. That's perhaps, even that's not right. They're animals. That's much better. Right, so I'm going to get to mapping soon, so even though we've had quite a few comments coming in, so I want to get started. So sturdy fences for animal pens are all there to slow down any attacker. I mean, they could slow down any attacker, but if any attacker is going to come in, they're not going to come in over the hill. They're just going to come in towards the main gate at this point. And arguably, if they're coming down from the mountains, they're going to be coming down from this side on the other side of the canal. There might be an argument for the local state army coming up with an idea for defending the canal, to use the canal as a method of defending from the mountains, from the creatures that live in the mountains. So you might find that the beginning of works along one of the sides of the canal has begun, so they can turn the canal into not just an area that goods get passed down, but turn it into a defensive structure as well for the overall population. That's something to potentially consider. And yeah, not a problem, Benjamin. Metric is important, particularly because a good chunk of us are using it. SD says it's not the ancestral home of the Duke, right? The hill could just be a location of an old farm that used to be the richest farm in the area. Then the Duke decided to expand. He threw the tenants out. Yeah, that would be the case. Our story at the moment was more that most of the area around the village here was just trees, and very thick trees. One of the reasons being that there is definitely a Gyron buildup. That's life magic for those of you who don't know your Warhammer lore too well. A big buildup that had caused thickets to grow, and that's still in this area here where the halflings are living, providing a certain amount of extra greenery around this area. It's also something that we built a story that's being tapped by other nefarious forces. So the idea was most of this area was either marsh moving into thick tree, and those thick trees and roots have provided a far more sturdy ground close to the river here than you often find in other parts of the River Reich system. The River Reich system gives away to marsh for a significant proportion of its length, well over 50% of it. If you take the Altdorf flats or the Grootscher Marsh down at one side, or for alternatively the big marshes around Karaberg, around Altdorf, over by Castle Reikland, the marshes are everywhere. So the idea that we have an area that has a reason for why it's quite firm by the river was established relatively early, and this is one of the reasons why, possibly a site of some. We discussed various other ones, I think, in video maybe 3. So if you want to go check our previous ones for that one, well worth doing. And it has like 17 different stories tangled together. Yeah, it totally does. And I think unpicking those stories will be a part of the write-ups and deciding exactly which one makes best sense for the area, because once we finish doing the vast majority of the mapping, you'll see that there's certain areas that require a bit more development, or some that require it to be dialed down a little bit to make more sense of somewhere else. Right, anyway, I'm going to start diving in, because it's about time that I get to actual mapping here. We haven't specifically called out an area, so I'm just going to go across the river and warehouse up this section here. This section is a little bit close to our main thoroughfare, so we're going to probably want to have at least 1 or 2 rather grand-looking warehouses that are looking out here, or perhaps centres of business that sit there, and then we'll collapse into less grand ones sitting behind. So when you get past the stone throw of civility, it starts to become a less impressive area. I'm going to go on to my lines layer. For those of you who want to know how I'm mapping this, what software I'm using, just very quickly, I'm using Photoshop. Apparently there's nothing there. Good old Adobe Photoshop, nothing special, nothing beyond that. I'm not using any preconceived assets. I'm just building it as we go. It's as simple as that. I'm drawing all on Cintiq Wacom, which you can probably see down here. Wacom Cintiq is a stupendously expensive piece of kit, which basically means I can draw on a giant screen like it's a giant iPad. It's enormously heavy, but it is pretty damn cool. You can buy various stands to make them sort of stand in front of you so you can draw like that, but yeah, I have no time for that nonsense. Might be quite good for the streams though, because I could sit there talking while I was drawing. But nah. So yeah, that's what I'm drawing on. And that gives us a drawing looking somewhat like this. I'll also say that if you want to know the techniques that I'm using for this particular style of map, I did a tutorial about this. You'll find the link inside the description to this particular video, because it's video 1. And video 1 will take you over to the Rookery YouTube channel. The Rookery did a tutorial for how to draw maps well, I did the tutorial for the Rookery for how to draw maps, one of the master classes. There's a Patreon over there if you're interested in that. There's probably a link to Patreon in there somewhere if you want to go check that out. That's entirely up to yourselves. I also say that given that I'm on YouTube, I should also do the quick call out for, please, if you're watching, do like, do subscribe, do ring that bell, do all those things that people do when they're on YouTube. For all that, I'm going to do this regardless of how many people turn up and watch. It's still nice to hope that somebody else. Do I want to have a space between? Yes, I do, because I want to have at least 1 or 2 yard areas where it goes. Pardon me, I'm interrupting myself as I start to draw. Now, so I'm going to work my way through this area here. I'll do the lines first, then we'll discuss. I'll pop the colors into place and build a nice area. If you have any ideas for how this should express, now's the time to drop them in. We want to have in this green area at least 1 purple location. For those of you who weren't with us on our previous videos, the purple locations are the numbered locations that we're going to be writing about. So we're going to want in this warehouse area at least 1 building of local importance. Now, it doesn't need to be important because it's big and impressive. It could be important because an interesting NPC lives there. It could be important because it's a single example of a type of magic inside the city that is rare. It could be a single example of a particular type of business. It could be an example of something nefarious or dark going on, which is particularly given the time that we're playing in as we head up towards the end times, assuming that you're playing in 2512 up to 25, oh dear, the world has gone boom, assuming you do that. The end times are an era unlike any other. Everything is a bit broken. Everything is a bit dark. And when everybody makes reference to during Magnus's time, when the world had collapsed and everything was awful, most humans don't realize that the time that they're living through just now in 2512 is worse than it was during the last Great War against Chaos. Mutation is more rife. Beastmen are all over the place. There's all manner of horror going on all the time, but because it's what they're used to, they don't really realize just how bad it has got over the course of the last 200 years since the last incursion of Chaos. So there's all kinds of different things we can drop in, including for our regular viewers, the potential of fishmen somewhere, because that has been requested on more than one occasion. So if you've got any idea for what sort of location that we could add to this, or if any of these buildings call out to you and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that could be one of those, we could use that for that. Now is the time to drop that into the comments. And when I finish doing this part of the drawing, I'll bring the comments up and we can discuss what works for the best type. Okay, so if that cuts in there. I interrupted myself there with my best type in there. Yeah, okay. So I'm getting an idea of this barge area. That's going to be open to the road, I think, which means I'm going to take out that line, fill that up with road. So yes, if you have any ideas for this area, now is the time to pop them into place. Maybe there's a specific type of office. Maybe there's a specific type of character in this area. If you have an idea, drop it in now and we can talk that out. I'm going to make that over the edge slightly. And as I said, if you want to know the techniques that we're using for this, I'm still using just the tutorial that I made for the Rookery for making this map. I'm really not using any further techniques than that. And I'm doing that for two reasons. One, it makes doing this a little bit faster. But two, it also means that anyone that's checked that tutorial will be able to make this map themselves at home if they wish to do so. At least that was the plan. Right, let's pop down to the road layer. Where's my roads? I always lose track of the roads, and I'm going to add in a little bit of color around this area because this is clearly mostly going to be warehouse, open land, perhaps a little bit scrub in places. Stock will be piled up as required in this area. Warehouses for goods that are perishable, but mostly it will be out and free, which means I need to get at least one fence in place, a couple of gates as well, to provide some form of very basic security to the area. So I'll do that in there as well. And we'll pen off one section. Perhaps that's an individual business that's running all of that area. A couple of smaller buildings off towards the side. Yeah, okay, that's pretty decent. Not much to do in that small section. We're about to move into another warehouse section. I'm going to put some color on these buildings that I've done first. And once I put some color in and put that in place, I'll pop back to the comments and chat there. I will also bring up the banner to make sure for anyone that comes in late, they're aware that I'm not going to be paying that much attention to the comments while I'm doing the mapping section. So we've got quite a few buildings that are behind effectively one penned area here. So this could be one business or perhaps a couple of businesses that are working in tandem. Some of this could be offices, or they could all be warehouses with maybe offices sitting on the higher levels. Again, if anyone's got an idea for how any of this could manifest in a way that's not immediately obvious, do bring that up in the comments. And yes, for those of you who use Photoshop, I could have done this quicker with a larger brush, but for reasons unknown to man, I have decided to just fill it in with this brush. I'm almost done. There's not that many buildings. This is not the fastest way to color this in, but hey, I've done it now. Again, using the techniques that I did in that tutorial, all we're going to be doing on these is a quick highlight, a quick shade, and we're going to call these areas done. The idea is to have something that is fast, doesn't take too long to draw, and for all these streams have possibly been going, well, we're on stream 6 now of many. And this map has been built over many, many hours. If I was just drawing this professionally and doing it for someone else's books or something similar, this would be much faster. Pop in the shade here. Again, these shades are done very, very loosely on purpose. They're not necessarily 100% accurate. The idea is to make each of the buildings pop and to ground them into the surrounding area. The idea is not to be absolutely perfect and super accurate, because when you zoom out, all that accuracy that you tend to put into place is just not seen. So if you spend an extra 15 minutes doing that for all of these buildings, you will be doing this for, well, months. And who wants to be doing that unless you choose to? So there we go. There's some quick shade and highlight on that. We pop out. That should immediately look like it fits into the surrounding map without too much difficulty. It does. Let's get rid of my extras there so that we don't see the lines. So we've got that quick area there. I'll pop into the comments now and check those. And if there's nothing there saying other areas or special buildings, I'll move into the green area behind. So I'll move into this, I'll move into this area here and start filling that up with something, probably larger buildings here with some open space in front of them. Some of it leading down to and working onto the square, and then a bunch of extra storage areas at the back. Okay, so let's see where we were inside our comments. A few from Yala, but it looks like. On the corner, I presume we're talking up here, maybe a large trading guild building with offices in the front and warehouses in the back, and possibly fake. Now, we already have a trading guild up here. So a second merchant's hall doesn't seem very likely. We could have other forms of guild that could be represented in the area, if you've got any ideas for that. But I do like the idea with offices in the front, warehouses in the back, possibly a massive fake clock tower. If we're doing that, I think building that one there might be a little bit better, so we make the building look a little bit more impressive. And I do like the idea of the possibly fake. And you could have a really daft little aside that whenever the clock may have broken, nobody's really fixed it, and whenever dignitaries come, someone is employed to scramble outside and fix the clock to approximately whatever the hour is. So when they gallop on past, they look up and they're like, oh, look at that. The clock is accurate. You got to remember that time in the Empire is extremely fluid. I wrote a section about this actually inside the Tome of Salvation, and how even individual parts of the Empire have got different versions of what the weeks are, what months are, how the days themselves are named. But time itself is loose, in that noon is largely well known. We can use various sundials to get an approximate of the time, but normally in most of the towns of the Empire, particularly in the Reikland, time is recorded by the temples of Sigmar that ring out bells every hour, which is why you'll often find small references to the third bell or the fourth bell, as in 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in some of the books. So when the third bell rings, that means it's 3 o'clock. Sometimes this duty is taken over by a temple of Verena, but because there's normally only a single temple inside most towns or cities, that's just not effective for very large areas where the distant tolling bell might be completely misheard or taken to another time. So in the Empire, where there are temples of Sigmar everywhere, often multiples of them, the time is largely handled by the cult of Sigmar. So I quite like the idea of potentially a broken clock sitting there, because it speaks to as well the how a lot of this is a facade and it's a bit of a fake to try and impress people where the truth is not necessarily quite the same. Moving down, a purple location idea could be a spy from somewhere, possibly Altdorf, possibly elsewhere, snooping in the shipbuilding techniques used. If we're going to do that, I think let's not do Altdorf. It's the obvious option. In fact, maybe we do. Right, so the dating of this is 2512, which means currently our 2 primary fleets are dealt with in Reikland with the Imperial First Fleet, and with the recently commissioned Imperial Second Fleet up in Nordland. And that's the fleet that's currently under the command of Boris Todbringer. This is a fleet that if you run with canonical events, will fall out of Boris Todbringer's hands, which means that he plows down hard on building up a fleet in Karabakh, his own one, which doesn't have permission from the emperor. The northern fleet falls into the hands of the new Elector Count of Nordland when that's established. Again, assuming you follow canonical events. So it's quite possible that if we've got Middenheim standing contrary to Middenland, that we could have ourselves some agents that represent the burgeoning growth of the Imperial Second Fleet, looking into what's happening with Karabakh and whether they like the idea of Middenland building its own fleet down there. So we could possibly have someone from the north. We could have a good Nordland character. And by comparison, the Nordland fleet is significantly better than the far bigger but far older Imperial Second Fleet. These are proper seamen who understand what they're doing, many of whom have been through long-term education down in Marienburg, proper maritime education to command sea vessels, unlike the northern fleet of the Reikland fleet, which is just full of nobles who have absolutely no idea how to command a ship, with ship's masters who do the actual sailing to the command of the noble who sits there being relatively toffee-nosed, making all the decisions without actually understanding how a ship works. So there's definitely something that could potentially be done in there. Got to remember that captain is a commissioned rank, which means all captains, indeed almost all commissioned ranks in the Empire, are pretty much nobles, all of them. There's obviously going to be some examples that they're not, and often writers for Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay forget this, or just simply don't know that's what it was historically and have done something completely different for Warhammer. And that's also cool because the Empire's huge and there's all different manifestations. But all of the officers in the state army are pretty much noble. Similarly, all of the officers inside the fleets are noble. They have commissions that were purchased for them in the hope that they can get reimbursement or that they can get extra influence or whatever from their particular commissions. Anyway, moving down swiftly, Yalab also says, also according to my notes, we need a Temple of Sigmar in the southern part of the city from my initial expression. Yes, I agree. And I was expecting it to be very close to the slum area. It's a good couple of 100 meters. We've got, in fact, our closest Temple of Sigmar is actually quite far away. It's all the way up here. So actually, you know what? A Temple of Sigmar sitting off the main square might be a good idea. And we can have ourselves a smaller second one all the way down here, perhaps being responsible for getting the local community to work together and play midden ball in the open, slightly marshy field that's down there, using midden ball on muster day to help promote team nature amongst the locals, help build a militia, something that Sigmarites are particularly interested in doing. So I think possibly two of them down here at least. Benjamin suggests, I just remembered, is there a winding hall, like a place to turn around a towered barge without going out to the river, or a towed barge, not towered? Probably. We haven't marked one of those. We've instead got relatively large areas here. You can't turn through this section, but it's big enough for two barges to go side by side. But you can turn down here. You're going to be able to turn here as well. I think the winding halls, there might be one maybe there, but I think they're more likely to be slightly further up the canal system, where there may be turns going on, definitely near the top of the canal system, because in the end, it's all about doing it as cheaply as possible, so they don't widen the various canals, because it's hard to turn a barge around and under a normal circumstance anyway. Instead, they just build a system to lift, twist, and turn. So I think possibly around here, I'm quite open to you offering an idea as to where you think that should be, and that's just adding one of those in if you think it's a good idea. Benjamin says, is there already an area designated for timber storage around the dock? There is at the moment, Benjamin. There's a very large timber yard that's sitting up there. Much of that wood will be used by the shipbuilders and dropped in there. The actual primary trade is done here. Much of the wood is caught in that area. A big chain going across here to try and make sure none of it slips out, because this area here will almost always be filled with just floating logs, many of which will go up into the deal yard here, handled by the deal porters, the stevedores responsible for the wood. But we're going to need a lot of wood down here as well for the shipbuilding. So as wood is potentially brought down by barge or floated downriver, and it'll always be downriver from further up the Reich, they'll need some storage here. I imagine the area out here has been long used for storage for wood before it then moves into other parts of the city, purely because the tower was one of the earliest things that were built as we built out the extra wall there. Again, I mentioned this in previous streets, probably built in a Roman style, if you know how Romans built their towers out in the water. It's a relatively simple but cunning way of building these buildings, and very much how I think the Empire would probably do it in this sort of area too. So I think we've probably got wood here to a degree, and it's probably snuck in behind here. Perhaps we want to cut in here a little bit and create a natural pool, which has been used for yanking it up or for further down to the shipyards. But again, if anyone's got any ideas for different ways of doing that, well open to it. Hello, Lethbridge. Delighted to see you here. I like the idea of the artisan barber and tattoo artist educating Cathay, who also grows bamboo, running a little side business from one of the warehouses in the bucket trade. The good old bucket trade. Acts as the main. Yeah. See, now this is somewhere that we can definitely have ourselves people from across the old world in a way that sometimes feels unnatural in other parts of the empire. Loosely, the empire is not a great melting pot of different people, but different parts of it are. Altdorf, for example, is. Marienburg, although it's outside the empire, 100% is. But Altdorf is very much a melting pot. It has people from across not just the old world, but across the world living there. It has a significant Cathayan population, a significant Nipponese population, for example, huge Tilian populations, Estalian populations, Kislevite populations, even large Norscan populations from the Southlands. And a lot of these have become thoroughly naturalized in that there's no difference between someone who may have been from Southland extraction to someone who may have been from old classic Unbergen Reikland extraction. So you're going to be getting your Southlanders popping in with deep Altdorf accents in a way that some people who've been playing Warhammer for a long time forget. And this isn't just something that's Warhammer facing, as in, oh, Warhammer has tried to be a little more equal. It's just how it was in history. Wherever people met, you got a melting pot of different types. If you take London, London has been like that for centuries. And it's constantly amusing to see people decrying, oh, no, everyone was white. And then they bring out another 4 or 5 people of African extraction that were in the Mary Rose, for example, when it sunk. And they were 100% English with English names, but would have looked to our modern eyes like, does that mean they're African? No, they're English. 100% English. England is not quite how many people thought it was. And the more that we've learned about our history, particularly once the genetics are involved and we can dive into bones and say, oh, this person came from this part of the world, the more we've learned that the world is much more diverse than it was originally perceived, but often in congregations in particular places. Altdorf is one of those. And I think Kalegen provides us with an opportunity to also do that, given it's going to have so many diplomatic envoys. It is, however, a much newer place. So I think you might find that staff from various ambassadors will live here, and perhaps second generation people who may be, I don't know, maybe second generation Estalians. The Estalian ambassador maybe lives here rather than Altdorf, preferring it here, traveling over to Altdorf maybe once a month, or for important events during the social calendar. Say, for example, at the start of the year, there's a good 3 months worth of parties that go down in Altdorf. So maybe pops up there for 3 months, then maybe goes down for Black Powder Week to Nuln for a month or so, and then maybe lives out the rest of their time over in Kalegen. And their children are born here and naturalized here as well. So you've got an opportunity for mixing up that way. And a similar, adding ourselves Cathayans or others, I think is well worth it. I'm well up for having ourselves an artisan barber. As I recall, we also have some NPCs getting built over on World Anvil that involve tattooing too, that Martin has been building. Martin Iron Rook, if you go and look at our World Anvil account, he's been writing away a bunch of NPCs that we're going to be nailing down, hopefully, of course, the next couple of weeks. And they're going to be all added up too. So I like this idea. And I think that possibly down in the trade area, around here, that makes a lot of sense. And it's always good to have at least one barber surgeon going and adding a little bit of character, as long as we don't delve deep too much into Orientalism and making them weird, bizarre stereotypes. I think that we can definitely go with something with that. And possibly an entire family, maybe not just one, or maybe one older member of an old retinue from a previous generations worth of ambassadors and someone who stayed, or perhaps someone who's second or third generation in the empire. So the descendants of immigrants. We could take several different routes, and if you've got ideas on that, go for it. Yeah, I would suggest we have a separate Sawyers in North. Yes, we do. Why are we back in buckets? Because buckets are important. Check the last stream where we went off on one. I would think though that you would need to prepare planks to the docks. Yes, you absolutely would. There's going to be there's going to be some form of that. But again, planks are relatively easy to shift if you know what you're doing. They're not if you don't. And we definitely have skilled folk here. And I think that there is going to be a good sense of tension with the stevedores and the probably the carpentry or wood or whatever guild that we decide to call for that, where they will be solely responsible for providing the wood, meaning that the shipbuilders who would love to have it right beside them for local political reasons are not allowed to, given both the Sawyers, whatever particular guild name we go for them, the respectful guild of carpenters and sawyers or whatever it is, will get their cash from the sale, and the stevedores who are going to be packing it to be shipped not very far but up to here also get their cut, and then they unload it for the shipbuilders who are utterly unimpressed with the lack of efficiency and are constantly probably calling on the local burgomeisters to try and tighten this up and to deal with the guild issues. But the guilds don't want to let go of this because they don't want to lose the money that comes with their individual step in the production process. So again, I think we take a look at what is perfect, and we look at what's more likely to happen when people get their fingers into the pies. And whenever you're looking at Warhammer, you always try to add an extra layer of problem if you can, because humanity as a whole is in a state of high tension and upset. We're moving towards the end of the world. Whether you end your world or not, it's entirely up to yourself, but that's what we're doing. So always adding in those slight impediments to things working smoothly is a good part of building the story of not just the frustrations of red tape, but for the general story of what the Warhammer world as a whole. Distribution point where the imported weird route and other exotics are packaged and whatnot. That's our buckets, as I recall. A store for wood within on the edge of the shipbuilding zone makes sense. It's absolutely essential. There's going to need to be an area that's designated for the stevedores to drop off their wood. But I do think that there's going to be a certain amount of red tape involved with that. Their nickname would be Little Pale. I'm not even going down in that one. Yeah, I said the one we have is specifically for mine goods, ores, etc. We have a second, more generic one, I think. Also, I think the other side of that smaller street when we have, is that you're saying for wood or for something else? I didn't quite catch that one. Leopard says, I just got to do the brain, not 100% at the moment, maybe Kislev and not Cathay. Again, I'm unbothered exactly where they come from, but I quite like the idea of a Cathayan just because it's nice to mix it up a little. I hate autocorrect, so do I. I constantly use my iPad. An iPad has a massively aggressive autocorrect, and the number of mistakes I make online is enormous. I make loads of mistakes with typos anyway. I'm not exactly the most, let's say, neurotypical guy. I'm constantly mixing my letters up for one reason or another. And the autocorrect for that reason is useful. But can I deal with fantasy stuff? The number of times I've had words that, as far as I'm concerned, are good, normal words, discarded by my iPad. Whatever. The bloke person says, perhaps for the shipyards, it could perhaps work like the old Venetian, not Vietnam, as I was about to say, Venetian arsenal, where they had a lot of pre-built section ships where they could then hammer together really fast, giving the illusion of building in a day, making the city's shipbuilders seem much faster and better than others. That really matches the tone of this place. Really matches the tone of this place. In that a lot of it is facade and front. They're trying to look like something they're not. I beyond quite like that. I really like that. That is a good idea. And I think that possibly with that in mind, we could actually transfer some of the shipbuilding all the way down to where the yard is. The shipbuilders getting paid to do X, Y, or Z down there. Things get shipped up here. And then when dignitaries arriving, large chunks of ships can be hammered into place. It can all look super effective, like things are actually happening. Maybe one large ship in the dry dock being built a little bit more a little more slowly, or about to be launched, or something similar. Yeah, I also quite like the idea that possibly there's one ship that's in a constant state of not being finished, purely because they just go onto it, do lots of hammering whenever a dignitary goes by, and then leave it alone. Possibly the remnants of a large great ship that they were going to build, but they abandoned purely because it was technically infeasible for them to put it into place. There's definitely something in that, the never completed ship. Quite like that just as a concept. That says the person set from Northern Spain is lauded shipbuilding endeavour that came to Kalegen. It's utterly shocked by the poor quality and primitive techniques used. Sounds like an idea. Totally agree. I also think that's good. And I think that let's add an extra layer to there. Perhaps our spy is sending back the exact opposite because they don't want to leave, because they're living the high life in a city that is largely designed to cater to high-end nobles, and they found themselves a bit of a niche where they can live a pretty good life. So they're sending back that there's all manner of technical marvels and shipbuilding techniques that are relatively new and secret, and they're trying to plumb out the truth of going on, when in truth it's all a bit of a mess. The whole thing is one giant facade, including the spy. Again, that reinforces that idea of well, we've discussed that several times. You get the idea. I definitely think that one works really well. Boone Jam says, I visited Appledore, which is an old civil building town where they made hulls in Canada and sailed them all the way to Devon to get finished up. Yeah, that sort of stuff is not uncommon. Different pieces getting made in different places. We could also potentially have some of that happening here, where they may have taken over some of the keel building and the hull building here to float it down to Carraburg to be finished and kitted out. I think there might be some resistance to that from the local shipbuilders and possibly Kalegen, the Hulskrugs as well. But I definitely think that that could work really well, so that the business can be a little more complicated than just simply, I do build ships. We can have certain parts of ships being built down in one part of the town, hulls being built in another, large ships being impressively constructed near the main point where the local dignitaries arrive. And yeah, that adds a little bit more texture to the whole business. I think that works really well. Yalp says, yeah, there's a temple from the initial expansion, so about the center of that section within the old wall makes sense. I presume we're talking about the Temple of Sigmar, and I agree. I'm going to mark that when I finish this set of comments. The new southern part of the city also has a temple marked on my notes, so that would cover the slums. Yes, it would. Hua says, nice location, the Fishman Tales. The fishermen are back. A stevedore and halfling merchant's tavern owned by a weirdly slim halfling. In reality, a secret gnome hotel. I am not against something like this. The Fishman Tales, as in like a fishman's tale. Is that the pun that we're going for? Yeah, I quite like the idea of this. We've got our small trade section, so dropping in one that does that around there would be a good idea. I'm not against that at all. In fact, we'll mark that in as we go by. Lethbridge says, I just woke up, so apologise for the buckets. There's never a reason to apologise for buckets. Following the Duke's hubris, maybe he had or is having an enormous ship built, but he has added a deck too many and it will capsize. We already have this, Esty. If we look up here, you can see I've started already drawing the enormous great ship that was one of their first shipbuilding failures and was just too big to properly resolve, and has sunk and sits in the bottom of the river there, and silt has gathered up in it, meaning that it's now completely grounded, and we have yet to decide exactly what's in there, but there's definitely something. Yalab pretty much supports what I just said there. As Esty goes, we're ahead of you, Esty. John Smith says, port cities and ship crews have always been far more cosmopolitan than average. Absolutely true. There are written sources we've not known about too. Elizabeth first complained about Indian. I ask her, I presume I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize. Not sailors, for instance. Absolutely. And you know what? Having somebody from Indon here somewhere would be a really good idea too. Having ourselves some Indish families doing something in the region would be a really cool idea. Yalabad's and yeah, we talked about some emissaries from other imperial provinces that could have quarters in Kalegen, Italian, Estali, preventing smaller city Aldorf. Could be a nice touch. Yeah, I agree. I think that'll work really well. Yeah, the porters in the north will handle your wood like no one else in Kalegen. Absolutely true. And I really. Anyway, moving on. The one we have is specifically for Mine Goods Exhorts. I meant the Trading Guild building. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying there. The clock tower being suggested. You're saying that it would be for broader mercantile businesses where there would be a bit more of a stock market going on in there. And yeah, possibly, but I think the building's big enough that it could accommodate far more than just simply Mine Goods and Ores. And given the size of the place, we don't necessarily need to. Again, happy to be overruled in that one. Currently named Kalegen Mine Materials and Amalgamation. Yeah. I'm not going to go over that one again for the previous stream. Supposed to have a more general trade. You know what? I think you're swinging me. I think you might be right. Alexander then says, we're the one person we should get some more mapping done. Totally agree. It's just because you keep on saying so many cool things. Not that I don't like listening to the ideas. Yeah, me too. And we'll finish off with the Alan's comment, which is, I love the Venetian Arsenal idea. And also, how large are wolf ships? Do we actually have enough space to build one? Yes, we do, especially for the part of construction that has to be done on land. And yes, we do. The area here is surprisingly big. Wolf ships, if you look for your standard second-rate ships, ship of the line, go do a search online. That's about the average size for a wolf ship. Some of them are first rate as well. Some of them are pretty big. But your average wolf ship is not that large. I covered it in an article in the Shades of Empire book, Imperial Navy, and it discusses how big all the various ships are in there. So if anybody's got that, it's a Warhammer 2nd Edition book. It was published by FFG. If anyone's got that to hand, they can probably get the actual stats from there. Right, so I think we've got a pretty strong idea of what we need to start building around here. The first thing I'm going to do is mark out where our 2 Temples of Sigmar are going to be so that I don't accidentally fill up that space with something else when I move into those areas. And then I'm going to go up to the trade area here, add ourselves our, I think it was a barber that we're going to drop in there, and there was a halfling inn that we're going to add in there, halfling. If there's anything else that I've missed, can you please bring that back up in the comments again so that I don't miss that? So I'm going to add those, as well as adding what is a bit of a seaside shop front. I say seaside, it's still down by the canals, and it's sitting across from a bunch of ores. So perhaps we'll have some of that facing on the inside so we get a nice trade, a nice mercantile street that works off from here. We'll then move into the larger warehouses, possibly the second mercantile merchant guild hall, and then just fill up the rest with warehouses, leave space for do our shipbuilding over there. Yep, I've got a good idea where we're going there. Yalab suggesting that the second rate about 50-60 meter, yeah, normally. You tend to find that the largest ships were rarely longer than around about 80 yards. That is about the 60-meter rate. They're rarely bigger than that, because once you get past a certain size, the ships tend to break under their own weight. There is lots of techniques that were done to stop that for some larger vessels, but they tended to be individual examples rather than the standard ship of the line. And the Wolf ship is one of the standard ship of the line of the Imperial First Navy. So you're probably looking at around about, on average, about the 50-60 yard area. Couple of banks of cannons sitting on that to either side, a few bow chasers, perhaps something at the stern, but most likely not. A relatively high aft castle, largely because we are talking Warhammer here. If there's not castles on it, what are you doing? So there's going to be some relatively high buildings on both front and rear, with at least maybe 2, maybe 3 sails, with the classic Wolf ship having a single one, I think sprit rigged as I recall, but that need to be checked. Right, so let's drop into this and get this done. Okay, time to map. Get rid of the bit that says trade, and let's start filling in this area. So we need ourselves first our Temple of Sigmar. And I'm going to cut the Temple of Sigmar into the front, or onto. Do I want it to? You don't want to have its rear end sitting on the main road that's going in. You kind of almost want there to be a nice view over to a nice big temple sitting there. So I think we'll have ourselves a clear road or wider area that's leading down into the main trading area, where we're going to have all of the people gathered with their various stalls selling goods from pretty much everywhere. So I think the Temple of Sigmar there makes the most sense. So I'll pop that there for the moment. We'll go with the classic hammer shape, with the nave of the temple being there, the head, the hammer, where we can have the nobles coming in, assuming they're coming into that temple. We'll make it a relatively large one because we want this to be the impressive part of the scene. A central bell tower sitting at the back. In fact, I'm going to move it slightly further back so it doesn't go over the sacristy, given that this is a new temple. So I can build it off to the back there, and then we can add some further extra designs when we actually draw that one into place. As I move down here, I'm also going to take, I'm going too far outside the walls. We're going to build one down here beside where we're going to be putting our midden ball pitch. This is going to be a far smaller temple that we're going to drop in here with that. Now, let's make it even smaller than that. Not far off chapel size, about that size there. Again, taking the classic hammer of Sigmar. Got to remember that Sigmarite temples never have pews, which is worth noting because that means they can get an awful lot more folk into them when they're perhaps a lot smaller than you would making them a lot smaller than perhaps you might expect. Entire villages can gather inside those things and be worshipful on Festag. All right, so we're going to need to have a road that connects over there. Probably something like that in terms of its general width. We'll worry about that in a second. We're going to go diving into this area now so that we can start doing our little tradie shop fronty areas. First thing we want is a nice barber surgeon, which is going to be a small building, probably on the lower floor of another building with residential parts above. I quite like the idea of it, perhaps, looking over the harbour. So I'm going to drop that one here. A simple box for that one with a simple roof. Old rickety chimneys at the back. So that one will be there. We also require the inn that's going to be handled by our fisherman's tail, or the fisherman's tail, or whatever. We're going to make that a bit larger. We want this one to be relatively close to where people might be coming in as well. So if they're coming in there, they've got a bridge over there. Yeah, that'll do. We'll make that a bit larger with a cross part, and we'll make the roof sit over in that. It'll have right up to almost the front of the canal itself. I'll have a small arch possibly here that runs through into a back yard where we'll have a small stables. So the arch will run through that part there. And they can bring a coach in, and we'll put a coach house over on this side as well, so that we can get a coach, horses, ponies, whatever else needs to be brought in. Add a small extension that was added at a later date as the place became more frequently attended and money began to flow. Okay, so that means we need to have a road. Where's my road layer? That connects to the back here and goes down towards the main part. We need to have a road at the front that's going to make its way all the way down. I should use a bigger brush, but hey, I am where I am. Goes down to there. We need a road that runs down the front of the thing in general and connects through to the main shipbuilding area. Now, I believe there was one other location that we're potentially considering for this area. If someone can bring that up in the comments, I'll go check it in just a moment, but I'm going to finish off doing this section first because I can very quickly add anything else that's needed as we go. Okay, so there we go. We've got our area in place. Let's go and get our lines for a bunch of buildings in this area, which are going to be a mixture of small shops, probably some residential sitting above. So you're probably looking at 2- and 3-story buildings through this area, the bottom layer of which is entirely given over to retail endeavors and similar. So, oh, my brush is way too small there. What happened? Oh, now it's way too big. I'm on the wrong brush entirely. Let me just swap that over. There we go. So loosely, we'll have something like this. Let's break that up in the middle with another building type. Let's into a backyard for that one, into okay. Getting an idea of what this place feels like now. I'll draw the front rank and how it likely forms up first. Some of these will be independent buildings, a bit dodgy in shape. Let's knock that into place. And then we'll have our main line of shops be sitting at the back with a road there. So I'm going to mark that road as well. Then I'll check the comments. I'm not going to spend too long on them this time because I want to get some mapping in place. I know I say that every time and I end up chatting about something, but I'll be good this time, honest. And connect that through to there. Okay, I want to have a quick look at my grid here. So yeah, we've got, because I've got to think about how we're going to fit our ships into the shipbuilding area. Okay, so each one of those is 10 yards. So a ship is going to be about that long. Oh yeah, we've got loads of space. Yeah, we're cool. Right. Let's get back to my lines, fill in this area. So that's going to go across like so. Have a small lower area moving down so that smaller ships can berth there. Let's take that off. Where did my road go? Did I accidentally delete it or switch it off? What am I doing? Come back, road. Thank you. I've gone right over my road because I accidentally deleted it. Well, removed it. Let's just quickly put that back in place. That never happened. Nothing to see here. Okay. Put that in place. So these are going to be a mixture of retail, shop, housing, backyards, irregular buildings, classic Warhammer, mess. Should have been planned. It honestly was, but people start filling up the gaps and they shouldn't do. Some of them built off the road slightly until we get ourselves up front here. Yeah, okay, I'm beginning to see how this works. That's going to be a backyard there as well. A smaller one there. Yep. Okay. I'm just about finished this little section here, and I'll go check the comments to see if there's anything that I missed or if anyone's got any other ideas, and then I'll finish off the colouring of this section, get it in place, and then move straight on to the next one. Okay, that's a yard, that's a yard. If I do that, and go onto the roads, put that in place. I'm going to open that one up too. Cool, alrighty. I think we are good to go check the comments. I'm going to open that up there. I'm going to have a clear way through to the coach house at the back here. In fact, the entirety of that's going to be open, and that's also going to be like a little alley. Yeah. That works nicely. Okay, let's have a quick check of the comments. Where was the last one? And Josie saying, Abby's here. Hi, Abby. Hope it's going well over there. And my mapping adventures. Do you enjoy my mapping adventures? Yalb says, you don't miss much actual mapping, to be honest. We're like 8 buildings in. So true. That doesn't surprise me a great deal. No, that Josie's been dealing with me over talking her entire life. A gajillion dad lectures. Honestly, it might be the least amount of mapping I've done an hour's worth of time in any of these. Go figure. It's pretty impressive. You're having a lovely conversation in the comments. I'm going to move past that and just go straight to in the shipbuilding area. We are planning to include a rope yard, so we should reserve some space for that. Thanks very much. That's a good call. And Yalb says, having Josie in the chat so makes it feel wholesome feel. Fuck off. Does not. I mean, it does. I didn't swear. Right. Anyway, moving on. let's get these all colored in. We didn't get any other mention for locations here. So whoops, get my location color. So I'm going to mark in our in, which is going to be this location here. And we're going to mark in our barber surgeon, which I was going to put there, but I think I'm going to, or maybe I'll definitely pop it over there. I'm quite happy with it there. That's nice for that location. And we'll then add the building color for the other ones and then highlight and shade those and then move on to the next section. I'm going up a brush size. I don't need to do this so slowly. Alrighty. If anyone has anything that they would like to see in the next section, now is the time to potentially add that to the comments. I'm not going to look at the comments until all of this section is completed. There we go. So that means I'm going to be doing the highlights, the shades, and then any other detail that might be required to make it look like it's a little more real. Right, let's just check those. Add a little bit there. Yeah. That works quite well. Okay, cool. Let's add our shades next since I'm on that brush. Okay, I'll make a consistent height of that and then amend it for individual buildings. Have a bigger building there. Make that one a smaller one. And then drop that down to about that for that one. Okay, cool. That works. A relatively large building for this one. Shade on that side, shade on this side. Not quite so big for that one. Get the shade in place there too. Again, as I've mentioned multiple times, the shade is meant to be relatively loose. A lot of this is going to get covered as we do other areas. It can always be tidied up later. The aim is to get an idea of where the shadows all lie and not worry too much about it being perfect. It's about making it almost right. There we go. That's good. For me, let's go on the highlights. And pop those in over here. And that almost does this area, except for a little bit of extra detailing just to make it work as a location. I'll add a little bit of trees to this area as well. And muck it up just slightly. Some of this will be scrub. It's into the back. We're going to have shops down the other side here as well, which I'm going to pop into place in a moment. Let's add a little bit of vegetation on the tree layer. Let me just grab that brush. We'll use that one at size 4. Drop that down opacity to about that. A little bit of loose vegetation in the backs and the yards. Lovely. A little bit overgrown here and here in an attempt to make the place look a bit more impressive. Add a little bit to that as well. Okay, cool. Yep, that provides us with enough detail so that it'll look nice when we zoom out. It does. Get rid of the lines there because in the way of seeing that. Okay, yeah, we're doing not too badly there. Let's head over to the other side here. I'm going to do this part here. This part here might end up being just a few buildings here and then moving into an open area where we're going to need to have it all build up some extra bits and pieces. I'm going to leave it. I don't think I'm going to draw any ships in place. I'll just leave it an open space so that we know we've got the large area for messing around with. We'll put a small slipway on it and various other bits and pieces too. We're going to need some. Are they going to be permanent crane-like features? Yes, some of them are. So we'll put some detail into that area as well for the shipbuilding. Right, very quickly check the comments before I move on to that. How about a failed attempt as a dry dock that's now being used as something pedestrian? If you give me an example of that, I'm quite cool with that idea. Haunted warehouse merchant died in a terrible accident and is taking it out on whoever uses it. Stevedores won't unload there now, but maybe some adventurers could be convinced to try. Okay, yes, I quite like this idea, and perhaps we should do that on one of the warehouses. Take a look if they see there's an empty gap. If not, we'll pop it into one of these ones down here. But I mixed that up a little bit because that's almost exactly what you'd expect. Let's have our ghost be a stevedore who died because someone was trying to basically cut out the stevedores, because stacking up goods is a skill. It takes a lot of knowledge to do it correctly. And this stevedore was killed because some basic laborers were hired to stack the stock into place. And when he came with his team, his gang of stevedores to pull it all apart, the whole thing just collapsed on them. He died. It was the fault of the merchants and the laborers. So the stevedores will unload there because they're the only ones that aren't haunted. Everybody else is. So the stevedores are fine and nobody else is, because it's the ghost of the stevedore who is particularly hate-filled and angry and may require some form of exorcism. And I think at least one extra layer of depth to the story to make it work extra well. But yeah, I really like the idea of it. Possibly if we dial up that terrible accident and make it a little bit worse. But I think the idea of him being killed by the lack of skill of others because people are trying to do stuff on the cheap works relatively well for Kalegen as a whole. Got to remember, whenever you're adding a new adventure hook, so to speak, or a new location, you want to think about how it ties to the theme of the location as a whole. And the theme of this location is that it's one giant facade, that everything looks like it's impressive and expensive, but behind the scenes it's done on the cheap and things are broken and it's all a bit shoddy. And that's become the case over time. It had high designs to begin with, and to some respect, the Duke probably still thinks that those high plans are in place. But the truth of it is, on the ground level, it's kind of broken and things are falling apart. And that would really nail that down as an idea. So yeah, I really quite like that. Maybe a tavern ready nearby for workers to go for a drink after work, or breaks, waiting for the planks to be delivered. Grandfather's bear garden. Why bear garden? Normally we're using bears. It references Kislev, and I know that that's not a good thing because there's imperial bears of many a type. But the bear garden, obviously it's a pun on beer garden, I presume. But why grandfather's bear? What's the idea behind that? If you've got more to support that story, that'd be awesome. Yav says a beer garden tucked between the warehouses makes sense. I agree. That does make sense. I quite like it. Totally up for this idea, by the way. One-story warehouse with the second floor never finished and refitted into the bear garden. Not unheard of that people trashed through rock plank. No, that's not a bad idea. I really quite like that. Just the haunted warehouse seems a bit underdeveloped. We probably want more of a story for that. Yeah, I agree. As I say, it needs an extra level. It needs something extra just to make it have, I don't know, traction. Possibly it is just wrapped up with this beer garden. As there's no problem with how the beer is so cheap, so workers keep coming back. Warehouse that's haunted, the stevedores are not bothered. It's hardly a problem, to be honest, because the business can go on as normal for the most part. Or can it? You can have all manner of issues that arise from this, just because a ghost isn't doing one thing. And this is very much there's various ways you can add extra utility here. For example, this might have been a warehouse that was used for smuggling, which is why the cheap laborers were put in place during the day. The more expensive stevedores come in, they get the downside of that. This is the only place the local criminals can probably work from, but it's haunted now. There's issues that come from that. So the local criminals are looking for it to be exercised, and explaining why that's the case and ensuring that the ghost doesn't vocalize any of the various issues that are going on in the local area means that they can't just go to the normal authorities. So they have to go to dodgy folk who are probably PCs. And then the PCs are put in a moral quandary where they're left going, do I help the ghost or do I help my employers, the thieves, the smugglers, the downtrodden or whatever? Where exactly do I go? And whichever choice they make will have a bad outcome as well as a good outcome. So you always make the decisions difficult. So yeah, there's lots of easy ways you can mix up your warehouse being a bit of an issue, but it does require, as I said, that extra level. So I agree with you that adding something to it will make it significantly better. I imagined you were going for beer garden, but I thought you went for beer garden on purpose. I thought I'd check. So I'm going to definitely drop that in as a location here because I think that that's a really good one. I'm going to drop it in over on this side though, because that's where we've got our looser merchant areas, and it would make sense that we can have it sort of close to our Temple of Sigmar, sort of close in the middle, a bunch of warehouse. We're building a big one here though, aren't we? No, actually, I'm going to build it there. Right, let's go get that into place now. What brush am I on? I'm on a ridiculously useless brush, so let's just use this one. That's better. Right, so again, we've got shop fronts going into place here, which I'm going to quickly just block off, add some extra building parts too, as these give away to a back alley probably as we move into impressive warehouses at the front, which stop about here as we move from, so I think it's going to be mostly large style ones moving into thinner ones, and then we want them to have a cutoff of about there. I want to leave that space open for shipbuilding. So I'm just putting some loose lines in place, which I'm going to rub out later for where I'm going to be putting things. A larger building here, right on the front, potentially related to the local shipwrights guild. So that's something that we should potentially consider for here. I can imagine a big clock sitting on this as well. Offices at the back, hidden away, poorer quality to the front, which looks super impressive as you're coming in from the yard. Possibly there we can have a coach house off to the side for visiting captains and admirals to discuss commissions and how exactly they're going to be. There are stables sitting there as well. Someone to hook your horses. A little bit of open land, and then let's put these buildings into place. So I'm going to draw out these buildings first and where they sit. Once I've got those drawn out, I'll go back to the comments again. Again, we're looking for comments to potentially fill in this location with other cool and awesome ideas. I am going to fill it out with some loose buildings first, though, so we've got them all in place. Okay, so I'm also going to be looking for large warehousey style buildings. Let's go for one relatively big, deep one here. Yeah. Okay. So where are we at time? We're coming up to 8:45, and we've not done a great deal, but we have, I think, talked out quite a few good locations for this area. Let me just fill this all in. A little bit of extra at the back there. Now we're going to want it to go at maximum out to about there. So actually I think I want this to fall back into scrubland at the back, which then falls into, so there's going to be lots of loose piles of wood. Gather in this sort of area. Used as storage largely, which we'll mark without going into a great deal of detail for the moment. All right, so in this area, we've got ourselves some extra warehouses that look down into the shipbuilding area. Some of these will be smaller than others, each one of them with a slightly different function. Some of them will be tool sheds. Some of them will be gathering points. One of these can be potentially our haunted one. It goes into the back, so there's going to be a bit of
land claimed by some of those buildings. This area, however, has been claimed by the Halls Kroogs for the shipping. So we're going to get at least one more back here. Let's now add a couple of details onto those. This area is going to be pretty much empty. So I'm going to fill that all in with color in a moment once I've finished the core of the building here. And then we'll go check the comments. Yep. I'm actually seeing this place in my mind. I'm imagining the detritus piled up in various places. Yeah, I've got an idea what this looks like now. I can see it in my head. It's quite a large area. I'm going to cut into it slightly for slipway there. And then a larger one, long and thin. Yeah. Okay, cool. I've got this area sort of in place in my mind, so I'm going to go check the comments in just a moment. See if there's anything else. If you've got anything you'd like to add to this area or ideas that you think would fit this particular part that we're building well, you can bring those up in the comments now and I'll deal with them all in a oneer, and then I'll do all the colouring for this. And if anyone's brought any extra ideas to the table in this section, I will go and add those to the area too. Small extra office there. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's have a quick look down there. Oh, there's a few here. Grandfather, hint towards Grandfather Reich. Everyone's too lazy to go with the full name. So, as in Grandfather's Beer Garden. Yeah, we do have the Grandfather Temple over there. That might be a good idea. I believe a haunted warehouse with tavern over it. That's how the ghost kicks out anyone that isn't a stevedore. Seems like the weirdest and quirkiest place. Definitely interesting conceptually. I think there's definitely something we can walk into. We can work with that. Left Bridge suggests, can the ghost be called the Water Dipper? People get scared into the canal. Yeah, possibly. If we're doing that, we'd need to have a reason for why he was scaring folks directly into the canal. Perhaps that's related to how he died somehow. Not sure how Moore's Temple wouldn't already have done something about that, I have to say. Moore's, the local area doesn't necessarily have to have a priest of Moore in it, or more importantly, the priest of Moore can't do anything about it. One of the things, particularly of my Warhammer world, is that the vast majority of priests are just normal people. They don't have any special powers. The gods have not selected them. They're just folks. This is reinforced by many of the novels, although some of the more frequent ones tend to have every priest of Sigmar wielding a big fiery hammer. But in my Warhammer world in particular, if there was 100 priests of Moor, maybe only one was blessed, probably fewer. Blessing is super rare in the same way that magic manifesting itself inside people is super rare. Those who have the gift, the ability to do magic, is not something that everybody is capable of doing. It is, however, something that all PCs can do, because PCs are special. So if your PCs decide to go off and be a priest or decide to be a wizard, well, lo and behold, they have the ability to do so. To conclude on that one, the local priest of Moor probably would like to do something about it and is impotent, and possibly has been asked to do it several times, has failed. The place is still haunted. The priest or priestess may not like the outcome of this, may have called back to Altdorf asking for somebody to come and resolve it. Maybe a wandering doomsayer has attempted to resolve it, but the spirit has proven to be stubborn. There's all manner of extra stories we can add to that one. I like the idea that they just put in a box and throw it in the river from the second floor of the warehouse. I like that you like that idea. That amuses me. This seems awfully elaborate for a ghost. Does a bit. But it is funny. I couldn't be that after the third drunk killed someone before someone launching them out the window, they had to invent a tale about a ghost to stop the tavern for being closed. No, I quite like the idea of a ghost. We don't have a haunted location inside the town. We could undermine that by using the ghost to cover something else, but given that we are in a relatively high fantasy, although it be a grubby fantasy setting, it's good to have things that aren't just people being shit again. So we can have ghosts represent the people being shit again. A little bit more, say, the Witcher's angle of how resolving things rather than a medieval fantasy version of how we resolve things. People do bad things and it has repercussions, and many of those are spiritual. In this particular case, a ghost that does not move on and has gained perhaps some sort of horrible power that is doing nasty things with. Local priest and more can't get rid of it. It's not affecting stevedores or whatever other story we build around that. There's quite a lot that could potentially move into that. Yeah, suggest, okay, hear me out. This is a wild one. Do like a wild one. How about we make that stevedore ghost some sort of spiritual leader evolutionary who after dying tragically has attracted a cult-like following from local stevedores who now threaten anyone who even speaks about exorcising the ghost. That very much fits in with the general feel, particularly if we make this spirit kind of corrupt, a bit broken because of what happened to it. So the stevedores think that they're doing a good thing where the stevedores kind of aren't. And that can put the PCs into a difficult position, assuming they're the ones attempting to resolve this, where they've got effectively a bunch of good guys that they're now thinking of hitting on the head. And that's always worthwhile plumbing down for a potential storyline. While gathering every night at the haunted warehouse, listening to the ghost preaching about some overthrowing the merchants that exploit the workers or something like that. Yeah, there's definitely something in that, particularly if we can tie it into something relatively spooky. So it's not just a ghost sitting there preaching away. That's a little bit too in your face and obvious. Mixing that up a little bit so that we can add a spooky element, a bit of a creepier element, something that the stevedores had to buy into, and perhaps as a new stevedore is inducted into the cult, so to speak, they've got to accept that the thing that they are listening to is not 100% acceptable by normal society. So definitely something to think in that one. John Smith says, I imagine any local religious authorities probably assume many fatalities are just drunks drowning in the canal. Yeah, I think that that's going to be the case to a degree, but people aren't that shit. When people die, people tend to respond. And if multiple people die, there's going to be some form of investigation, whether it's from the locals, whether it's from an appeal to the priest, whether the priest refuses the appeal because they have failed to do an exorcism in the past, so are brushing it aside. So it's not so much that the priest has gone down and failed. You could have the priest literally not even attempting it because they're terrified of being shown to be a fraud or incapable of dealing with it. They're afraid that it will be seen as a threat to their spiritual authority and for handling all the local death matters and similar. There's lots of reasons that we could easily have this issue not be resolved by the local clergy. And that was our last comment. Excellent. So there was nothing about this area per se. Oh, I brought that comment again. I'll just get rid of that. So I'm going to finish off the colouring and then add a little bit of background to this. We have so far 2 probable locations in the area. Location number 1, as I move back, where's my locations? There we go. Location number 1 is going to be the shipwrights, which are currently sitting up there very close to another one. So I'm probably going to build another building down here for the shipwrights. And location number 2 is going to be our spooky warehouse. We don't have a spooky warehouse directly on the water, which means that we won't be able to do exactly what was suggested with bodies getting turfed into the water if we put it at the back, say here. But we can still do the whole beer garden thing, the cult thing, coming in at night. We don't want it to be somewhere where there's going to be a lot of people at night. So having it in the very heart of where the warehouses are and where everything clears out because the ship builders have left the local area, that makes sense to me. So having it here allows for all the various plot elements that we've discussed as a potential for this building to manifest, other than one thing, which is the dunking. But if we bring in a little bit of water here or there for one reason or another, you could easily do that. For example, just doing that, having a section of water for one reason or another at the back, or you could have the ghost just drowning them in something else if that's something that we feel is worthwhile doing. Anyway, I'm going to get stuck on with the conclusion of getting these colors in place so that we can move on swiftly. So once I've done this section, I am going to go over the road and finish off the warehouses on the other side. If you have anything you think should be on this side near our Temple of Sigmar here, this is this warehouse section here. If there's anything that you think should go there, now's the time to pop it up. If you think, for example, our haunted location would be better there than where it's currently being put, you could mention that, for example. This is not the right brush. That's the correct brush. That's better. That's doing what I want. Let's just fill this in area here. So again, we're just doing the browns for all the buildings to keep everything consistent. I think I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier in this stream, do a color change for the old city walls and probably the new city walls when I get to them, so that the city walls are very clearly delineated and we can see them when we're referencing the map. After all, this is designed to be something that's conveying information, not necessarily 100% accurate to colors or anything else. So getting something that will reinforce that is, I think, a good idea. Probably in color, we don't want it to be gray because that'll disappear. I'm not sure what the best color would be for that. Definitely not blue. Yellow would be weird. Any oranges are just going to fade into what we've already got. We might end up with gray, you know. Although grey will very easily vanish into the surrounding material if we're not careful. Okay, so that's our colors almost in place. Then we do some highlighting and shading, and then detail a few extra bits inside our ship building area. And if there's anything you think should go in there, just holler and I'll add that in. Before I do that, though, I'm going to grab my road layer. And, oh, didn't fill that in. There we go, roads. So I shall fill in all that. I need a far bigger brush when doing an area this size. Okay, that's now beginning to look like what I was imagining in my head. A couple of loose roads, or at least the idea that this area is not scrub entirely at the back. It's been cleared out and pushed back in various points. This is actually quite a big area. Yeah. I like that. Okay, let's go back into my lines and mark these off. I'll add that in the shades in a moment. Scrubland at the back. Okay, let's get our shades in. Once I've done my highlights and shades, I shall pop back into the comments. Okay, this is working nicely. I can see how this all falls together. More of a tower. This is a big building, so this one's going to be casting a longer shadow. Oops, but not shadow unto itself. That seems to be somewhat of a physical impossibility. This one's a little bit shorter. This one's a bit taller with a tower sitting at the top, which we can just roughly put into place. Nope, that's not right. That's not right at all. It's going to be going more like that. Better. Okay, so I'm going to be hitting the comments very soon. If you've got anything that you'd like to add as we're making our way through this section, now is the time to do so. Okay, yep, that's all beginning to fall into place. Let's see how many shadows I've missed. Yep. Highlights. Pop those in now. Again, for those of you who've joined a little later, if you want to know the techniques that I'm using for mapping this, I did a masterclass discussing exactly how to do a map like this, providing a 7-step guide for doing this sort of map yourself. It is pretty easy. For all I may be zooming through it really quickly and making it look a little bit more complicated than it actually is, but it is a pretty easy process. And I did a masterclass that lasts for about an hour explaining each of the steps for this particular style of map. The link inside this video's description for video 1, the very first Kalegen video that we did, will take you through to the Rookery Publications YouTube channel. And there's links somewhere in one of the many videos there for our Patreon. And it's over on Patreon that you can find that if that is your inclination. There we go. We have highlighted, we have loosely shaded, we have got ourselves a bit of an area here. Feel like I should add a couple of extra details on the lining front, just to give the idea that this place is a bit busy and used for various things. I'm on the wrong brush type. There we go. A couple of extra bits and pieces. Again, there's obviously all manner of extra things we should have here, but the goal isn't to necessarily depict everything that would be in the area. It's to provide the impression of what's going on so the textual description can do the rest of the work. Providing this location here with that idea that industry is going on. Things are busy. A single boat sort of sitting on its side, very loosely sketched, just to give that idea. Whoops. Of what's going on here, but little else. As a small aside, if I was doing this professionally in this area, I would probably spend more time reading the description, finding out exactly how it was described as manifesting in the local area. And then each primary point of the description, I would make sure that I drew one thing to support that. And there's all manner of different things that could have been discussed as being in this area. But given that we're doing this, well, for us, really, there's no reason to necessarily go into all that extra detail. No, that's a nonsense. It wouldn't do that. The shadow goes like that. It sits back like that. There we go. Oh, that'll probably do. Color, 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 color. Wrong color again. You hear me click in the background. It's me going Control Z to get rid of the thing that I don't like. Control Z is my friend. I don't need to look at the computer to know where Control Z is. I use it all the time. That is that area kind of in place. Loosely. Perhaps we need a little bit more there. Perhaps we don't. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to add a couple of little lines. This is just more to suggest that these locations are used frequently. more than anything else. Just a little bit, not too much, because you don't want to mess it up to the point that it becomes difficult to read what's going on. That'll do. I'm going to get rid of a little bit of that line there so it connects through. There we go. Yeah, okay. That is beginning to look like a place. I'm going to edge this area up just a little bit better because that is messy. Whoa, whoa, I'm in white. Oops. Oops. Right. Let's take a look at the comments. Now I'll go dive into the next area, unless there's something there that suggests I shouldn't. Okay, there's quite a few comments here. Is this where we were? Or skip the water dunking, go in the direction and Bizarro Revolution Stevedore Ghost Cut View indulge me? How about goes to preach? Well, we've done this already. How about when the ghost can only preach when it possesses a living body but can't possess any particular person for too long because they, for example, start aging dramatically? So the stevedores, I'm not liking where this is going. I'm loving it though. I will say, as it's necessary, having a single old half-abandoned well that no one is quite sure why it was built conveniently under the window of a tavern allows for the throw situation and all else. It would. Are constantly recruiting to bring in new people to be possessed as far. That's just mean. And the throw is part of the initial rituation, meaning there's a risk to die just hitting your head against something. As part of this guild, we do not have to do everything in one location. Well, that's obviously true. But I think that the dunking thing can work somewhere else, not necessarily with the ghost. Maybe the Stevedore Beer Garden, I assume these are separate. They do not necessarily have to be separate. Maybe the soup kitchen near the temple towards the slums. Maybe a mercy house might be better for it, run by the Shallians. Maybe one that's a bit nicer and saintly. VIPs go there to give to the poor after prayer. However, the real poor are not allowed to. Yeah, let's not make it mercenaries if we're doing this, because I quite like the idea. And to be honest, you could have a connection with this with some sort of bravery test that they inflict on recruits, bring them to the ghost. I still love that idea as it's developing, Yalib. As they go there, they stink in the eyes of the VIPs. State army patrols are regularly beating beggars, get clued close to the soup kitchen. Love it. Often kids from the orphanage are brought there to play with the, I'm going to go down to your next comment, poor for the VIP visits. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. And I think that possibly we should have this near the front here where we can have ourselves what would be, it's not Shallian Mercy House, it's a poor house where a soup kitchen is provided and the poor aren't allowed in it. Yeah, I like that. There's potentially some good story potential depending on how that's written up. And we can have a proper Mercy House down in the slum section where Shallians who come out from the Shallian temple that works all the way up here, as I recall. Some Shallians can make their way over there. There'll be a bit of a connection between the two places. Also gives an excuse to start linking up places, which is something that we also need to consider doing when you're building locations. And that's how you move your PCs from one place to another place to another place in what feels like a natural way. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is have people working in locations where they're not necessarily from, and they may guide the PCs to the locations where they more frequently are found. Yeah, I would suggest slums are outside the old wall, though, and that part of the town will have its own temple. The soup kitchen will probably be over there. There's something of an idea possibly that needs refining. I think it can definitely work here because we can have it be used as one of those buildings that were constructed probably at the order of the Duke to effectively be impressive. So while the coach is passing by and some dignitary is sitting beside him, he can lean over and say, well, this here, as he vaguely gestures towards the large soup kitchen, which is rather impressively kitted out with a bunch of rather well manicured paupers sitting out the front, is where we attend to the poor in a very clean fashion. They're all looking very nice with some, I don't know, matronly looking people overlooking them. And it's just something they can boast about. They go by, and then the reality of what that place is like can sink back into place, where the real proper Mercy House is underfunded, is an absolute mess, a soup kitchen run by Shallians that is in a somewhat desperate situation. And I'm going to think, probably, given that we're going to go for boggy land down here, it can even be a bit boggy in its basement and falling apart. So we can get two locations that outwardly might look similar. They're soup kitchens, but could not be more different if they tried. It is on purpose, not where it's really needed, because its main purpose is to be a place where wealthy people can pay generously. Yeah. And go about without the actual stinks of I agree. And I think there's definitely something in that. And building that into a location near the front so it can be easily directed to. But if that is done, and this is the choice that we take, there has to be more to it. What does it do? Is the building empty at other locations? That seems highly unlikely for a place that's relatively highly populated. Who works there? What do they actually do? Why would the Renans put up with their orphans being taken over there at particular points? They absolutely wouldn't. So we need a slightly better story to ground this into the setting and make it feel like it's, to use inverted commas quite strongly, real. And I always like my locations feeling as real as we can possibly make them. But cut a long story short, I like the idea, just needs a bit more to it. Let's see what else we have. Yalab says, I'm mostly sold on the fake soup kitchen idea. I'm mostly sold on it too. Not 100%. I'm going to pop it in. I'm not sold necessarily on how it's manifesting yet. It just needs a bit more detail. Maybe the leftovers from the fake soup kitchen are smuggled out at night to Mercy House by some righteous people working through there. I think that makes a nice little side plot at the risk of being caught for stealing. And I think that that's possibly a good idea as well. We can have ourselves somebody who is effectively stealing stuff for someone young who's been employed. They've been employed because they look a particular way, and their family is very poor, and they're stealing and taking it back to the actual Shallian Mercy House down in the slums where the rest of their family lives. There's definitely something that can be built into that. Again, though, the building itself needs something a little bit more solid to pop it into place right now. We've not had any extra comments for what we're going to add into this next warehouse section, plus what is now a relatively dominant Temple of Sigmar. So I'm going to build the temple and the surrounding warehouse section there. Get that into place, and then build some of our broken wall around here. And yeah, I think we're moving on quite nicely there. I'll just check if there's any more comments before I go, just because there's quite a bit of drawing in that one. If the soup kitchen is in this somewhat wealthy part of town, how about instead of inviting actual people in, need for the meals, they just invite locals when a VIP is visiting the city? Yeah, we need a story. And these are all somewhat scattergun ideas to justify an idea, but we need a better story. We know who founded it. It was the Duke. The Duke wanted a Mercy House sitting right there. The Shallians, upon realizing what it was, chose not to involve themselves with it. Perhaps it was built before the Shallians arrived in town. He wanted something that would feed the poor. The reality of that did not meet his needs. So possibly at the beginning, it had a solid and almost charitable foundation. What he required was something that he could take people around and be somewhat magnanimous and say, look how wonderful we're doing for the locals. This is the empire and its progress made manifest. We teach these people how to do better. We do this, we do that. But the reality of the poor is that it just wasn't working in practice. He didn't have the necessary resources in place to run that whole thing. So it turns into something different. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Duke knows. It's quite possible the people that have been charged to run it realized that the Duke was unhappy with the way that it appeared. So they started slowly but surely over the course of time, changing it to match the Duke's needs, which will have changed the entire tenor of the location. So that begins to build some sort of potential NPCs that could be there, the sort of Toadian character who may be in charge, exactly how they have turned what is a well-financed location into probably a personal business that is there purely for his own self-enrichment or her own self-enrichment. There's definitely something in there for a good story. And I think that we could really make something pretty cool out of this one. They look nice, don't smell too badly. Yeah, I think that's very much what Kalegen will need. Could that be our cat house masquerading as a poor house while actually being a social hotspot of the area? I don't think that would do well for this. I don't think that's a good crossover, especially if you're. It's not something that the cult of Katya would be particularly interested in, assuming you are referring to the cult of Katya. The cult of Katya would be. It's just not their thing. There's nothing in that really says Katya. This is very much Verena and Shalya. In some respects, you could argue those classical gods working together, that little family unit of Verena, Shalya, Myrmidia, and more, and what they represent, the civilization. Myrmidia originally was a goddess of civilization. She wasn't a goddess of strategy and war. Her original remit was quite different. So this idea of uplifting the poor and a socially beneficial location, but without any of that actually tied to it. I think there's something there. I'm not going to dwell on this one any longer because I want to get this drawn. But I definitely think there's something there. Still not sure what it is yet. Feels like the sort of thing that we should possibly chat out as we progress, maybe down in Discord. We're not using Discord all that much just now because we're mostly, where do I want it? I want it to be, take away from that. I'm going to need to draw some trees in here. So I want it about here. Originally a well-financed building. Have a bit of a backyard, perhaps butting up into other parts. Consider how this will be built. There's going to be an office in here. The person who's responsible for it isn't going to want to lose it. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm dropping down into Discord, and it might be worth opening up some more channels just in the Kalegen chat, which I think if I look up my Discord one, we've got that thing inside Lawhammer chat. It might be worth leaving the Kalegen one for discussing specific parts of Kalegen, and then opening up ones for we've got a problem about this location. What do you think will make it work best? I'm quite happy for other people to just go onto the Discord channel and do that themselves. Don't wait for my lead. I'm doing so many other things that I'll almost certainly forget to do it, and then it'll just be left undone. So feel free to dive in there and start building those. And then when we move them over onto the World Anvil version, everything can already be decided in place with some cool hooks and ideas for who the NPCs are, where they come from, and similar. I'll just quickly check because the thread's there. Alexander agrees with me. Yeah, good location to flesh out Discord. Yeah, I agreed. Lethbridge says, can it be linked back to Hyacinth with the social climber thing being used as another way to ingratiate themselves into high society? The husband can use it as a dodgy way to also sell drugs. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, that might work too. There's all the social climber thing in particular is definitely something that I think will start in there. Yalib will start the thread. Thanks very much. You are the best, Yalib. Thank you. Right, so I'm going to do this section now. I'm aware of where the time is, and I don't want my videos to be 7-hour marathons all the time. I much prefer them around about the 3-hour mark, purely because they're digestible by folks. And I'm currently a bit caught with a cold. You might hear it in my voice. And I'd rather not expose myself to potential COVID awfulness again by lowering my immunities. So I'll probably aim for around about the 3-hour mark again. But I will try and get as much of this into place as we can up here. And I won't stop until a district is definitely put into place. Okay, so I'm imagining this is a relatively impressive building. Possibly the most impressive actual temple rather than chapel of Sigmar. I imagine there's going to be a really nice chapel of Sigmar sitting in the palace for the Hallskrugs. Now, I'm not saying that this one is necessarily well funded. It may not be. Indeed, I think we're still to decide exactly what the nature of this temple will be, what the high priest is doing. Indeed, this could be even the high temple for the entire area, so maybe it is relatively well funded, which means that the priest would be here responsible for all other Sigmarite folks in there. Let's call it a diocese for the moment, because at least we understand what we're talking about. I don't think we need any formal separate chapter of Sigmar here, which means that we would have ourselves a high capitular in place, but I don't think there's any requirement for that. One of the more famous high capitulars up in Middenheim, and the reason that he's a high capitular is because he leads an order of Sigmarites from the High Temple of Sigmar in Middenheim that is responsible for guarding the silver flame that Sigmar walked through, the only mortal to have done so and survived. And some believe that's the reason why Sigmar was later deified by Ulrich. There are some parts of the cult that believe that when Sigmar passed through the flame, that's when he actually became a god. It wasn't later when he abdicated and moved off elsewhere, and that he was a walking man god, not a simple god that was ascended at a later date. You can take as much or as little of that for your version of your Warhammer as you want. But there's an entire order of Sigmarites. I'm going to scale that down because I don't like it. There's an entire order of Sigmarites that are effectively in charge of protecting the flame. Having said that, they're not actually allowed near it. The Ulrichans in the High Temple of Ulrich don't let the Sigmarites in. So for all this chapter is tasked with doing a particular job, and the High Capitular, Werner Stoltz, is responsible for it. He doesn't actually get in to do any of that. Excellent. Okay, let's imagine. I'm going to pop.
Imagine remaster.
Whoa.
2010.
Alexa, stop. Thank goodness I don't have anybody else in here immediately going, oh, you've got that Amazon spy playing. Oh, I could start saying that and making it do things. One thing that you've got to remember about temples of Sigmar, unlike real-world Christian churches, is that their grounds are often far smaller because they're not dealing with graveyards or anything similar. They often, however, are sited close to places where they can train people, so they'll have a mustering ground. The temples of Sigmar are often a center for local militia groups, with priests of Sigmar tasked to train locals to form militia groups to defend against any potential incoming attack. In this case, for example, we've got ourselves a big open square. This square is going to be filled on most days with various collapsible stalls and shops that are going to be selling goods. A lot of it will just be open areas where people will pitch up and sell their products onto others, or hawkers making their way through. It's a central market square. But we can have that each one of the once a week, pardon me, getting put aside on when they do their training. So the entire square is cleared and locals will be out there learning how to use whatever hand weapons that they happen to have to hand. Most commonly, it'll be things like staves, basic swords. The best weapons probably for this year are probably your spears, because they're cheap. Metal at the end, good for thrusting, and it's well known that a spearman is generally, and I know this is a super generalization, but a spearman is worth basically 2 swordsmen under normal circumstances, simply because of the reach. So training your militia with spear means that you're going to probably make a better defense force than if you trained them with a far shorter weapon like a sword, which would normally only be used by officers or skilled folk. We don't need to build big grounds around our temples of Sigmar for things like graves, but sometimes there might be small chapels off towards the side of it that a noble uses. There might be a variety of other smaller houses. There might be some small cells for visiting members from other orders. Say, for example, this will be run by the Order of the Torch, but there might be stables. There might be a coach house possibly for visiting dignitaries. There are almost certainly going to be cells for visiting witch hunters from, say, the Order of the Silver Hammer witch hunters, or from other orders, or alternatively from the Order of the Cleansing Flame, a visiting inquisitor. There'll be cells put aside for them as well, plus the high priest and all the other priests that may be sitting in situ. They're going to need somewhere to live, and it's not going to be inside the main temple, probably. So all of that, plus offices and similar for a larger high temple, need to be considered. So I will add in some extra building around this for visitors to work their way into. This is going to be a particularly sizable temple, because this is the high temple in the area, and arguably the reason why this whole place is a city in the first place. There's no arguable about it. This is why it's a city, because it has a high temple and a priest that is responsible for dealing with all the local areas. I doubt it's going to be a lector in here. We're not in the center of a lectoric. Where are we? I don't know. I mean, it's a very new area, so it won't be the case. It'll just be a newly appointed high temple. Right, I'm cool with this. Let's now work in the back area. Before I go on, we're just going to double check if there's anything in the comments. Yeah, no. That's all I'm saying. I brought the comment up. I'm not saying anything else. Thread is up in Discord. Callaghan's southward fake poorhouse. Thanks very much. If anyone's got any ideas for that, please do drop them in. If you're coming to this stream later, it's very possible that thread will still be running, even if it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. So do pop in. If you've got any ideas, pop into the Lawhammer Discord. I think we've got links for that sitting down in the comments somewhere. If we don't, if someone could add a link to the comments, that'd be really good, although I won't see it at my end. So this Temple of Sigmar would be about 70 years old. It was established during the first expansion when Kalegen first became a city. Yes, I think its foundations were put down there. I think it may not have been finished 70 years ago, though. I think it might have been finished much later, maybe a total build time of around 15 years. And it's now reaching the point, because it's maybe 50 years old. It's now reaching the point where it's beginning to get a bit old and worn in certain parts of it. So old enough, but certainly not an ancient temple by any measure. And yeah, totally. And Yalab says the high temple we planned to place in the rich district in the new expansion, and he promised me a large copper dome on that. You're right, I did, didn't I? I could put it here, but we could put a far more impressive in that it's a copper dome piece of awesome up on the hill, where this is the older stone version that was first commissioned by the late Duke, unless you've got a particular hatred for it. YouTube, any links we post in chat, so that doesn't work. I hate you, YouTube. Alrighty, so let's start filling up this bit in the back. Now, we've got our big one, which is currently marked out as our high temple. I think it probably will do that, although the comment that Yalab just suggested, offered, saying that Alexa, stop. I'm clearly saying words that it wants to pick up. I'm going to have to switch her off next time. Up on the hill, we might actually transfer the high temple from down here up to there. So this was designed to be the high temple maybe 70 years ago, and the local high priest who takes over maybe during the time of Callaghan's era shifts it all up there because it's far more impressive, and works from up there while all of the real Sigmarite malarkey happens down here inside the old city walls. So perhaps this is no longer the high temple it used to be, but it had a short-lived reign as high temple for about 50 years, and in the last 20 years it's gone up the hill. That could be a good way of doing both jobs at once, and I quite like that. This in particular, though, fits with the idea of the old Duke turning this place into a city and building a high temple. And then we can go all the way up here and build ourselves a new one in the upper class district for our new high priest, who one feels maybe somewhat venal. Alrighty, I'm going to move into the rest of this area. Yeah, so they weren't planning for a high temple, though, right? It's supposed to be a town back then, so just normal temples. I'm quite happy for it not to be that. It would require the permission of the Temple of the Cult of Sigmar, which would involve a certain amount of bribery, corruption, or alternatively something else. So I'm not too bothered if we decide to change that. Tam P. Hiya, Tam. Delighted that you made it. Hi, Alexis. No, don't. No. Yellow says, and the High Temple added a later expansion by the current Duke, who wanted a proper city, not just town. Yeah, I like that too. Alrighty, I have an alternative route for what this is. This we can make this monastery, or possibly a temple for the Order of the Silver Hammer. No, that would be better. Let's make this a temple for the Order of the Silver Hammer, which is where the witch hunters and wandering Silver Hammer warrior priests work from. That works really well. So we're going to have cloisters. We'll have a place for the horses. So we'll have stables. We'll have all the necessary outhouses to work with that. A big building. It suggests that the old Duke has some relation to that particular order. So perhaps the old Duke was helped by a wandering priest on their travels, or perhaps the old Duke was in need of witch hunters at one point. We can also have an outside chapel dedicated to the Order of the Cleansing Flame as well, meaning that we can kill two birds with one stone. That is strictly not a temple of the Order of the Torch, so is not a part of the whole official designation of town, village, city, or whatever. So that would work perfectly. How does that sound as a nice compromise? Do we get both things at once? I'm now going to add a chapel on the outside of this here, because I like the idea of the Order of the Cleansing Flame getting themselves a little place besides themselves that they can work with. Yeah. So that's going to be cells, outhouses, stables. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's Tom, thanks. I do not need Nurgle demons. I'm already ill enough. We like witch hunters with our secretly magical princess. Yes, we do. And I think that tension is something worth supporting. I agree. Tam P says, love your stuff, Andy. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Tam. My one of would be nowhere near as wildly spread out in the world without your maps. Thank you very much. It's always nice when someone comes in to see something like that. Puts a smile on their face. Lethbridge says, is this going to be Brother Brother Maxwell? Well, one presumes for the High Priest. Yeah, possibly. Right, so let's finish this. I want to do, before I get with this location, I want to finish off the rest of this warehouse district, which I'm currently not doing anywhere near fast enough because I'm too busy chatting about all the super cool special stuff that we could have here. We're going for a relatively large merchant warehouse stroke guild hall. I'm going to need to make sure that you can get easy access to that from potential incoming trade as well. Yeah, I think you can. I think we'll be okay. Lovely and tall. If it's going to be that big, though, it's going to have space in front of it. So I'm going to pull that back a little bit, bring it up close to there. We'll have an open square in front of it. Then we're moving into some potential shops. A nice haberdashery. Oh, we also have to think about. We almost certainly want to have a branch of L&S somewhere. That's Luigi and Salvatore. For those of you who don't know your deep Warhammer lore, Luigi and Salvatore are a piss take of a local supermarket chain, also clothes sellers and various other things called Marks and Spencers, Luigi and Salvatore. But Luigi and Salvatore are very different in the Warhammer world to the Marks and Spencers equivalent. Luigi and Salvatore, I believe, were mentioned in the starter set, but that's not what they were first added. They were first added in Warhammer Quest, of all games. Luigi and Salvatore were one of the important locations that the Imperial Noble could visit to get themselves particularly fine equipment, because Marks and Spencer is renowned for serving the middle classes in the UK. Luigi and Salvatore is renowned for serving the upper classes. I only mention this so that we remember to do it. I want to have a branch of Luigi and Salvatore over here. L&S, pop that there so that I don't forget to pop that in later. Right, so we want to have an open space that opens up to the temple. So I'm going to have the buildings in loosely that direction because we want, as people are going by, for the temple to be seen directly by any passing dignitaries who are making their way up this way. It's quite important that they get to see the full impressive nature of this large cloister and monastery building that we have building there. Okay, cool. So let's mark that out. We're going to have a building that's going to go around that corner, a building that crosses that, a building that sits like that, making best use of the space. We can fence that off, and then turn this into a road with some so if I get my road layer and mark that in, get out of it. Okay, so now we're moving into a relatively impressive looking area. We're going to want to make sure that we support this with maybe some statuary or something similar. Anything that helps make the place look a little bit more impressive to others. And also possibly celebrate someone relatively famous from the Halskrug past, possibly the previous emperor. A statue of the previous Halskrug, some of the previous Halskrug emperors actually might be a good idea. The Halskrugs lost a lot of power because of the Bildhofens when Magnus the Pious took over and pretty much kicked out the Halskrugs from Altdorf when the incumbent prince died during the Great War against Chaos, and Magnus the Pious took over as prince of Altdorf for a while before passing that title on to, for want of a better description, his secretary. And we ended up with, not long after that, the House of Second Wilhelm taking over the whole thing. I'm going to leave that as somewhat grassy, I think, and we can pop in some trees down that section. So some sort of statuary at some point would be a good idea. In fact, I might put something here in the gardens. We can assume that that's some sort of statue of one of the benevolent emperors from the past who was almost certainly a monster in his own time. Okay. When I finish this little side drawing, this section here, I'm going to pop over into the comments again, check those, and then finish off the north side there. And move into that area. Okay, we've got that now. We've got that going out into the square. We're going to need another one that possibly sits off the back. And then tie that in there. Yeah, that'll do. Nice. Okay, I'll color this section in before I move on to the next one. And do we have many comments? Not too many. Excellent. That name would need to be properly fake Germanized. Yes, it would. Found it in that little square, perhaps. Good idea. No, it's not particularly circular, but whatever. I'll tidy that up in a second. Little fountain there, some chairs. This place is probably full most of the time with hawkers and stalls all laid out, but we're not going to put all of those in because it'll end up making it look bad. If it's not permanent, I don't like putting the stalls in, although sometimes it makes it look better, immediately makes it clear that it's in market. Maybe I will put them in. I'll decide that probably on the next stream, not this one, because I'm going to do this area up the top here first, and then I can come back to the square afterwards. That's the next one. Are we going to do a spoons party somewhere as well? Who knows? Rich says, how about brother Max? Whoa, my goodness. I think we're trying to say it Meswell. Geigel. He could have a secret he pisses the troops with. Dude, you and your buckets. A series of statues of grand historical hall screws string along the promenade makes sense indeed. I think having them stepped all the way up is a very good idea along the entire length of it. I'm 100% behind you on that one. Oh man, I am terrible at any pronunciation. I'm going to try that again. Maxwell Gleichungen? Maxwell Gleichungen? Anyone who knows German willing to correct me on that? Because you don't want me speaking German. Okay, I'm going to add some color to these sections now. Put on the location color to the big Sigmarite place because we want to make that look all spiffy. And it also makes it quite clear that this is all one location and not a bunch of smaller locations all strung together. This is a big deal. And because it's not underneath the order of the torch, strictly speaking, the High Inquisitor locally probably runs this place, not anyone from the Order of the Silver Hammer. Although it could be a chapter house from the Order of the Silver Hammer. It's still undecided. But if it is, it'll be the witch hunters that run it, not the wandering warrior priests. They don't strictly have temples at all. The only temples for the Order of the Silver Hammer now are effectively chapter houses for the witch hunters. Assuming we want a High Inquisitor. I don't know if we do. I think I might prefer just having that order having some buildings here that they can use. Okay, that's that. We've got. Do we have a second location out here? I felt like we did, but oh yes, of course we do. We've got they're sitting side by side. That's a bit unfortunate. But it'll have a different. Sometimes they are side by side, and it'll have a different number sitting on it, so they won't get confused. Cool. Okay, let's now get our normal building color. Slap that into place. Now, when I mentioned earlier about shadows, not worrying about them too much because they're just going to get covered by other things. This is already beginning to happen. You can see here. This shadow would not, for example, cover this building because it would hit the building and sit down at the bottom and cover the frontage of it slightly. It's why I don't worry too much about the shades all being perfect while I'm working my way through. Right, so let's continue on with these bits here. I'm going to garden off some of this, or at least change the background color a little bit so it's a bit more green. Now, again, to address comments that I made in other streams, all these buildings would clearly have all manner of chimney pots all over the place, upper layer, crooked bits, leaning towers and everything, but depicting too many of these adds a lot of visual noise to the map. So I tend to only do some or hint at them because I've often found when I do them all, it just ends up becoming a bit of a hodgepodge mess that's very difficult to scan as somebody that's trying to decipher the map. And as I've said multiple times during the course of these streams, this map is not just something to, have and be pretty or use a handout or whatever. It's to convey information to anybody that's using it. And if that information is hard to get a hold of because of the way you've drawn it, that is entirely your fault as a cartographer in the building of this particular one. Right, I'm going to put a little bit of undercolor now. Probably about there. Let's see how that comes out. I want a slightly more vibrant one and about there. Let's see how that looks. Nope, not enough yet. And again, slightly more vibrant. Let's try that. That's better. So a little bit of green into these areas. I want green around that. That can be an outer courtyard there. Green at the back here. No green in here. One green section there. All the rest can be road. Road. Okay, cool. Yep. Okay. I'm now going to do the quick shades on these. Get that out of the way. And I'll do the highlights and then we'll go back to the comments again in case there's anything there. I have not been paying attention this last few minutes because I just want to get this in place. The last stream, and for a good chunk of the beginning of this stream, there was a bit too much chat meaning that not enough of the actual mapping was done. And I'd like to make sure we get at least some done in each one of the streams so that progress can be made and get more of an idea of what the entire location looks like as we build towards that. Oh, this place is pretty cool. I'm loving this. Nice big massive tower, which is going to go down like that. So come off like that. So more at that angle, go the wrong angle there. Again, I'm not worrying too much about this being perfect because almost certainly I'm going to have other buildings in the way there. So I'll just mark on a vague area for where that's going to be to begin with and then sort it better a little later. Okay, I'll do for the just now. How about down here? All right, as I said, I'm about to move up into this location here next. So if you have any comments for things that could go there, now is the time to pop them into place. And I will take a look at those. That is warehouses, if you remember from the beginning of the stream, for those of you who were here at the beginning. And we're looking for locations that would be interesting largely to PCs or for the GM to build interesting NPCs for the area. Okay, almost there. Let's add location color, building color. Actually, no, I'm going to pop a location color on this purely because I intend to discuss the screen, the location. Yeah, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to do that on the above the road layer. Will this work? Nope. Oh, yes, it does. There we go. Add a bit of a highlight shade in that in a moment. Right, I've got all my shades in place. This is a rubbish shade, so let's sort that. That's a rubbish one too. Okay, cool. That's largely everything in place. Let's do a few highlights and get back to the comments. I can just see out the periphery of my eye that some comments are coming in. While I'm doing this, if you've come in late and you haven't liked the stream or done that thumbsy uppy thing or otherwise rung bells or subscribe to us here at the Lawhammer, then please do so. Greatly appreciated. Plus you'll get warnings when we do more videos. I'm actually experimenting with some other little videos largely aimed at my PCs because so many of them don't know the Warhammer world very well. So I'm going to be doing like a little video about how Warhammer year works and how time works and that sort of thing. Stuff that is often hidden away in books that are aimed towards GMs, and thus players never get a chance to read it, and they're just left going, I don't understand what day of the week it is. What even is the day of the week? What now? So I was thinking of doing a couple of those, see how they work. They'll be rubbish, but, you know, if you've subscribed to us, at least you'll get a ping saying, Andy's done a rubbish video. Would you like to watch it? All right, that'll do for the moment. Let's zoom out on that one. Right. Okay, yeah, we got location building there. Lovely. Little green area to the north to go. Right, what do we have here? First one is, we could, says Yallop, even have a story of a sculptor who's making them gone missing whilst there is an unfinished statue of the current Duke with, let's say, extremely underdeveloped physicality. If it's unfinished, it's likely to be bigger because you decrease rather than increase when you do sculpture of this particular type. because you're chipping away at the big marble blocks. But I do think there's something in that, particularly because that could stand as a nice metaphor for the city as a whole. Defo like that. All praise the Northern Sun. Yes, all praise the Northern Sun. And the interns. Yeah, thanks. Quick question for the temple. It was the Order of the Silver Hammer and the Order of the Cleansing Flame. I don't have books on hand. Yes, Order of the Silver Hammer and Order of the Cleansing Flame. The Order of the Silver Hammer has two separate parts, largely because Games Workshop repurposed the Order for their witch hunters, the Order of the Silver Hammer. But the roleplay game side didn't take that change on completely. It left the Order of the Silver Hammer also being the warrior priests as it was originally. So the witch hunters and the warrior priests both come from the same order. And it's a split version of it. There's a big story as to how that occurred, but loosely speaking, one order, but only by manifesting in two different ways. The temples are not strictly speaking temples from the Order of the Silver Hammer. The warrior priests have no temples, strictly speaking. The temples are chapter houses instead, run by the witch hunters. There's a nice little aside about exactly how they do that elsewhere. The Order of the Cleansing Flame is a completely different kettle of fish. Again, it doesn't have that many temples because it's the Inquisitors, but it does have small chapter houses and small chapels spread across the Empire, which they use to travel from A to B. And any Sigmarite that sees the symbol of the Cleansing Flame is supposed to respond to their need, assuming that their need is great. And being Inquisitors, their need is almost always great. They are quite different to witch hunters for a variety of different reasons, but we can pop into that at a later date if necessary. We missed the fake broken clock tower with the Trading Guild Hall. I can add that on. Thanks, one. Unless you want to set with those. No, we don't. I think that's a good idea. I'll just add that on. Is there German way of saying Maxwell equations if Google is to be believed? Classic Warhammer naming. I was suggesting we plop our non-line shipbuilding spy roughly in that area. Yes, we were, but we can move them elsewhere if it becomes too purple dense. We could probably get it down to the side here by the wall without too much difficulty. Lethbridge suggested the fountain is also used as a water source or sauce by the locals. Would it be polluted by the flesh market? A bit too far away from the flesh market for it to be polluted by it per se. Most of the animals are either going to be gathering on the out or coming in largely slaughtered. It's going to be meat that's mostly coming in, although a lot of animals are coming as well because people will be looking just to buy their own. I definitely don't think it's going to be the cleanest of fountains. That much is certain. Also, that weird tradition is they're surrounded by perhaps people throwing something odd into it instead of coins, like that. And I was about to say, you beat me to it. I was about to say, maybe it should be buckets. If you missed the last stream, that obviously will not make any sense. Definitely not Yalip, who did miss the last stream and then watched it later and went, what's going on with the buckets? I like the idea that Sculptor got moved up to Rich to work there, maybe under duress. And I think that possibly you could do a really good plot hook for him going missing there. And why he went missing, it'll be the big question. And it won't be what everybody expects. All right, so I've got one purple location to mark up here, and I've got a clock tower to organize for this. The purple location being wherever it is that the Nordlander's working from, and we'll add it onto the edge of this road by the walls. I'm going to quickly mark in. Oops, I've got the wrong color on. I'm going to quickly mark in. I've also got the wrong brush. So let's just start again. I'm going to quickly mark in for like the third. Oh, my brush is too big. For the fourth time, I'm going to quickly mark in the old wall, which has been broken apart in multiple places. So we'll break it up here or there. The old battlement's sort of there in places. Stone has been stolen from the wall to help build other locations inside the city. And that wall will continue over here. So we're going to have a gatehouse here. And I'm going to actually build it as a gatehouse. So an overall roof, working over on that one. Also allows us to potentially install some form of state army presence there as well. And I'll have the wall sort of petering out here as it makes off from the gatehouse, which is still in relatively good order. And we can pick the wall back up about there, which means that our spy will have his house sitting off towards the edge. It's possibly a hostelry which is owned by someone else, and he's got a room up there, or she does, and very much looking to prolong the good life that they're having. Oh, it does make perhaps more sense to move that elsewhere. Want a relative in our power first. Let's do that now. Let's pop that to the front. And let's get rid of my highlights on that one. The shade. There we go. Excellent. So that's our clock tower in place. I'm sitting in the front of that. We want one larger building to finish off the front here. And then we can move into smaller warehouses that are sitting at the back, perhaps in a more traditional style. We've got a bunch of the smaller warehouses over here as well. These are perhaps private hire, short-term leases. Some of them butted against each other. One or two of them out of form and in a mess. One or two buildings that were built when the town was in a state of unsurety as to how they were building it. So not everything is properly laid out as it should be. Some of these might originally have been work buildings for the people who were constructing the Temple of Sigmar. And there may have been tents. Loose ground at the back of this. Something that people often forget is that most cities, old and new, have got large areas which are just open waste ground for one political reason or another. And having some at the back here makes sense, given the nature of the type of area that we're in. A couple of these will be new houses, new builds for people to live in. Right, let's start messing this all up. Adding our little extra details. Also, I quite like the idea of our scrublands sort of sitting behind the temple, behind that other building. I mean, this entire section could actually have some sort of shanty extras added to it as well. Some people who are rough sleeping at the back and some makeshift locations. It's all a bit messy. The temple itself hiding some poor folk who will almost certainly be relatively desperate, looking for work anywhere they can. I'm going to square that off with having sort of my roads first, and then fix out that area. Once I've done that, I'm going to look at the comments again, see if there's anything there to consider. So if we have that road connecting through to where people will be coming in from the side there, which means we need to have a frontage here that won't offend everybody. We need to mark these off loosely as well. Roads, perhaps move through. Yeah. Again, reinforcing that difference between the front and back of house, so to speak, of Kalegen, where front of house it all looks pretty, but back of house it's all a bit messy. And what should be nice and clean is not. What should be well built isn't. Not all of the city is entirely in place. some loose warehouses, some cheap labourers working here, possibly a cottage industry or two working from one of these back houses. Our spy living down here amongst what is not quite slum, but is definitely not the best part of town. Oops, that brush is way too big. This allows us to have both our warehouses and mix it up, because we've got several warehouse districts, so to speak. So having each one have a slightly different tenor and tone helps that provide a little bit more texture to the city as a whole. If we just added a whole bunch of extra warehouses, this place would be relatively dull. But adding that extra detail provides more interesting places for the PCs to go to. And when they go to District X, whatever we call this place, it won't just be going to another warehouse location. It'll be a whole bunch of fronted warehouses. And at the back, it's a bit shanty-like and a bit messed up. And the local priest perhaps is involved with those. Perhaps the Silverhammer lot is somehow mixed in with them. Who can say? There's definitely something that could be used out of all of that. Right, so I'm close to building enough of this here that I'm going to pop over to the comments and see what you all have to add to this, if indeed you are discussing that. And then I will paint in this section, and then we might call that a night there. Let's have a quick look where we are. Yeah, that's that section loosely done. We get this. I'm going to have to put in some vegetation and such like in a moment as well, but I'm going to do that after I've done this section. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the comments before I colour this in. Oh, I left the last comment on. I apologise. I was thinking more dragging behind the barn. Not sure what that's about. That's the sculptor. Yeah, got the sculptor. Pardon me. Yeah, good idea. What the stevedores want a sculpture of the ghost? Ghost didn't like this. What does Nordland produce? Maybe a salt trader or something for the spy to hide in. Nordland produces all manner of goods. The Silberhugels are really close to the capital up there. Although, I mean, Nordland's an interesting place. It's not somewhere you're going to be getting many of its goods all the way down here. A spy is going to be coming under a completely different guise. And it's not the richest province by any stretch of the imagination. And the Nixes up there are not going to be likely the ones supporting this with any great weight. It's more likely to probably be the Coolers, given a significant chunk of the fleet often runs from Dietershaven. And again, that being the case, money won't be a prime thing here. So somewhere cheap and nasty and at the back makes quite a lot of sense. And we can have them living a high life outside of that as they're mixing with others, doing the whole spy job with a second life. But their actual life is spent in their life, pardon me. Their real abode, so to speak, is down in the dark back alleys over here. Something like that anyway. Next over is Nice. Hello, Nice Guard. I have no idea if I pronounced your name correctly. I apologize if I haven't. Hello from Copenhagen and hello from Edinburgh. Delighted to see you here. We have been working our way through some of the southern districts of Kalegen just now. I won't go into another long repeated discussion about what we're doing. If you want to do that, check to the beginning of the stream because I give a big introduction as to everything that we're doing here. Jalp says hi. Afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm presuming I'm pronouncing that wrong too. And Jalp says, and our planned warehouse zone quickly becomes a slumsy shanty town. Yeah, well, that's how it works, isn't it? And I think that it's relatively important that we do that because we have to constantly reinforce the nature of this city, which is one thing has one front and behind it there's a slightly different picture. And that's a good way of doing that. Alexander adds, but also a good contrast to the Grand Temple of Silver, making it look even grander. Absolutely. Okay, right. Let's add some color to these locations. We have one location marked in this area, which is going to be this one for our spy. He lives in there. All the rest of them are just going to be standard buildings in this location, this area. I'm going to get a bigger brush though, so I can color this in a little bit more quickly. Let's go for about size 9 this time. Nice. So one thing I'm going to do for next time, since we're nearing the end of the stream, is that we're reaching the point now where we're going to have to get all these districts nicely labeled up with all their special locations so we can start numbering them. Numbers will almost certainly change as we progress. But it means that we can also start naming all of our districts. We already have named a couple of them. 2 or 3 of them have got relatively fixed names. Others have got prospective names. Others have all just been sort of jumped together. Largely, and in terms of the overall process, we want approximately about 4 to 6 locations per district. You don't want to have too many more than that because it becomes a pain in the arse to read. This is generally the model we used for Ubersreich, and it also, to a degree, matches the size of the town, how many districts it probably should have. And in some cases, that'll be broken completely. There might be 10 locations in one. In other locations, it might be broken again completely. There might only be 1 or 2 in one of the districts. That's fine. It's meant to be loose. We don't use it as a hard and fast rule. It's a guideline only. A little bit like the Pirates' Law. Okay, let's add a little bit of shade on this as well before I stop doing these parts. It's all a bit dirty back here. This does not look like it's a fun place to live. I see probably some of the people who are living in these buildings, some of these warehouses may actually be converted to housing stock as well, given that the speed at which Kalegen advanced its expansion and the large number of people that were enticed here for one money-making reason or another. We can potentially reinforce that by dragging one of the local towns and having it suffer badly under some form of attack. So we can have ourselves perhaps an influx of folk around about 30, 40 years ago because of another location which was badly attacked. Some of them returned, some of them didn't, and they stayed in Kalegen permanently. And that gives us another reason for a relatively large population swell that doesn't feel like it's really unrealistic. And where did all these people come from? Rather than just, oh, they came from Altdorf just because we need them to come from somewhere. Okay, so that's our shades. In fact, I'm just going to do the highlights while I'm at it as well, because it won't take very long before I jump back into the comments. Oh, we still have a comment up. I apologize. Let me just get rid of that. And let's do our highlights. Oh, we missed a shade there. Completely missed it. There we go. Back to the highlights. There's also the possibility of a location back here that was originally meant to be something else, but has collapsed into ruin for one reason or another. As over the course of time, the different districts were repurposed for different reasons, according to local needs and politics. Yeah, okay, that's sort of looking like a bit of a place. Given that I did look at the comments not that long ago, I'll also add the vegetation before I look at the comments again. Trees. Let's check that size. That'll do. And let's drop that down to about 80. There we go. Again, for those of you who've come to the stream late, if you want to know how the hell I'm doing this, there is a tutorial for it over on the Rookery's Patreon account where I explain every single process that made this map. Indeed, if you're interested in just learning how to build maps, I very recently did another masterclass showing you how to do futuristic data slates, or effectively it looked like a Fallout map in the end, which wasn't the original intention. But you want to know how I make Fallout maps? There's a tutorial that went up just yesterday for doing that. It was quite fun. You'll probably, if you go into our Discord, you'll find a link to that. That's the Rookery Discord. I'll also post one over in the Lawhammer Discord, just in case anybody wants to get it who isn't over in the Rookery one. There's bound to be at least one of you, and I'll show you what we did for our image. It was actually quite fun. I really enjoyed that tutorial. I think Yalub was there. Were you there, Yalub, when I was doing that one? I was sort of running on automatic when I was in that one. I presume you were there. I seem to recall your name popping up at least once. Okay. This is really beginning to look like a place. Oh, yeah. Let's add a little bit more wild, messy. Right. Let's take a look at that. Hey, we've made quite some progress, actually. That's, I reckon the next stream will probably finish off most of the south side. Okay, let's have a look at the comments before I move on. Is this where we were? Also, no, we were on from there. Could there be a hedge witch hiding in plain sight of the temple in the shantytown who has a soft spot for helping the wee children? Yeah, there probably could, although it's a stupendously dangerous place to stay, and you would have to think about the foolishness of doing that. They could choose almost anywhere else. Why would they choose there? So could there be? Yes, but if there was going to be, you'd need to justify it. How about larger districts split into neighborhoods or something and having those approximately 6 locations each? I'm not really sure that that's necessary. It doesn't do anything that particularly adds. If I often think back to the various towns that I visited, and neighborhoods and districts are very much not really a thing in most of them. It's just, I'm now in this part of town, or I'm in that part of town, or I'm in that part of town. And sometimes they're relatively largish, and other times they're really tiny, just little sections. Even if I think about Edinburgh, you've got Davison Mains here, you've got Blackhall where I'm down there, then you move down to various other parts, and they all have different, slightly local names. I'm not sure that's necessary, but I'm not versed to it. Maybe lived there amongst the trees before they all got felled. Again, why would they stay? Really old, I get that, but why would they stay? We need to have a good reason to make that work. And he says, your pronunciation close enough. Danish is hard. I'm fully aware. The Rugg brothers send their regards. Yeah, my wife has been learning to speak. That's Lindsay, for those of you who know her, learning to speak Norwegian for quite some time. And once she started learning Norwegian, she then moved on to a little bit of Swedish and a little bit of Danish, because there's an awful lot of crossover between those languages. And she found Danish pretty much impossible. It was she was constantly caught in her throat going attempting to pronounce the words in a way that was even close to how they should be pronounced. And she half gave up and just returned to Norwegian again. She may, of course, completely contradict this if she could hear me. So let's just move on swiftly. Currently, last catastrophic event I have in the timeline is 2453 during Arkham the Black Siege of Altdorf, but we can add something smaller, more localized, more recently. Yeah, that is a while ago. Given we're at 2512, that'd be 70 years ago. That'd be almost when the place was first getting set up. And you could use that, possibly, the 2453, as a motivation for the place expanding from village into something bigger. I think there might even be something in that, because there's going to be refugees from that war. There's going to be some places that have been destroyed. The implications of that, far more than just, we decided to cite this battle at Altdorf because it's the only location that the studio is broadly aware of. So they go, hey, happened to Altdorf. They tried to kill the Emperor. Arkham the Black got all the way there. What that means in practical terms is enormous. So that catastrophic event could be one of the reasons for this town's founding. And it's nice to always tie the history into the established history of what Warhammer already offers. Around 2490 would fit. So then establishing the Order of the Swan in 2493 gets some additional context. Yes, it would. What tutorial? The masterclass that I did on the thing. You did nothing. I'm sure you did. We have hedges are close in the west. Well, yes, we do. In the north, another set here seems a bit repetitive. Although there is 2 different types of hedge witch. The hedge witch in the north is very much a hedge witch, capital H, capital W, rather than what most people in the Empire use the term hedge witch to mean, which is effectively a non-collegiate witch, because the term got co-opted largely by the cult of Sigmar over time to stand for any illegal witch, which was all of them for a very long time. They just called them all hedge witches, where the hedge witches themselves, the real hedge witches, were somewhat disgruntled that their entire, I don't know, lifestyle had been completely overruled. There's quite a bit on that in various Warhammer books at various points. Indeed, I think the Rookery, I think we even did a chat about hedge witches at some point on the Rookery, worth having a look at. Right, anyway, let's have a quick look at where we are and decide if we're doing anything else, because we are now past the third hour. We're at 3 hours and 18 minutes, and it's probably at about the time when we want to have a quick reassess and discuss what we're going to do for next time. The aim was to do a chunk of the inside the city walls, the old ones, and we've done that. We've left only that section around the outside to go, although this section here might end up being quite a big amount of drawing. I'm just looking at it and how much is involved. There could be quite a lot in this entire area over here. We've got shipbuilding to worry about. We've got ourselves a floating casino. We've got ourselves potentially a couple of dodgy shops that are sitting out over there. We've got some particularly large fortifications, a really, really nice pier. Yeah, quite a lot potentially in there. So we're maybe 2 streams away from finishing everything inside the city walls. 1 stream will definitely do everything on the outside. So we're talking everything that we've got here. That can be done really easily. I reckon this here might end up being an entire stream. So we're probably at 2. The best way to move forwards is probably to move on to this location next, start building it all out, making it all make sense. And then when we do the next stream, we can aim to finish that at a minimum. And if we move on, we can then move outside the city wall and do a little bit more as we progress onwards. I'm going to pull out and take a look at where the map is so that we can all have an idea. We've made quite a lot of progress, actually. Our city is beginning to look like an actual city. It's got some definite tone. It's got some clear areas and some park areas. It's got some poor areas and rich areas to come. I think this is definitely forming out quite nicely. I'm pretty pleased with this. I'm probably going to call it a night here then. So I'll take the last comments. Once I've done that, I'll do a quick summary and then we'll all say goodbye. So let's have a quick look at the last bits. We have, well, I have the town of Kalegen erection population 2433 earlier, so a bit earlier. I'm quite happy with it being earlier. I'm also quite happy with it being later if we can justify it. I don't have a strong opinion here. So if you go away and you think it would be better to be one or the other, I'm quite happy for you to take the lead in that, given that you're putting the document together for exactly what the timeline is doing. So have a wee think in that. I did leading that one, the one where that was the one yesterday. So I did literally yesterday, that one. So Lindsay wasn't in that one. It's looking really good. Great work. Thank you very much, Lethbridge. Delighted that you say so. When do you need the map? Is there a deadline? Right. So there isn't. I don't need this map, but I am considering using it. And by that, I mean, when I do the Anyway Within campaign and we stream it out live, which is really soon, when I do that, the first parts are going to be relatively recognizable. The later parts won't be. And I'm considering moving a part of my later parts down into Kalegen because I think it will fit better there. This is when we're moving into the equivalent of Empire and Ruins time. My plan is to stream the Anyway Within campaign over about a year. And my plan for the Empire and Ruins part is for almost 2/3 of that year. A little bit less. It's closer to 3/5. The Empire and Ruins section is freaking enormous. And the politics that are involved with that, the civil war that breaks out across the empire, the absolute horror that is manifested through the turmoil as previous allies march upon each other, as effectively chaos reigns, one could argue, is something that I want to spend a lot more time with than is perhaps immediately obvious, given the way I'm going to bash my way through the rest of the campaign. And Kalegen is a perfect location for doing that. Now, if we have that finished by then, I will definitely use it. If we don't, I'll probably use it anyway, because I reckon that we've got a good run here. We're about in terms of the total map, we're what, a fifth in approximately. So there's about another bit there. It's just about a quarter of the city in total, and then you've got all the outside the city crap. Okay, which is actually quite sizable. A lot of that's going to be trees out there, though. You've got some of the water as well. So we're about a sixth to the fifth in. Some parts of it will go much quicker, though, because they're going to be open parkland and palaces or tree areas. So the equivalent of what maybe took 3 streams an area might only take a single stream to do the lot later day. It's really difficult to pin down how long this is going to take. If I was going to be calling how long this would take if I was doing it without streaming it, I would look at this and I'd say I'd be done in a week. But that would be me sitting down and doing the work for a week, which is not what we're doing here. We're just streaming about once a week for 3 to however many hours I can put up with. So no real deadline, but I'll definitely be using it. About a third of the city, 6 streams in. I think it's much less than a third of the city if I'm being realistic. It's probably about a fifth of the city. So if that were the case, there's quite a few streams left. I maybe want to speed up next stream. I also work out the whole bucket arc and post it Discord. You do that. Yeah. She was in the Hedge Witches one. Yeah, she was. I think Andy might have been in that one as well. Andy Leask. I wrote the original Hedge Witch article, which lifted them up from just being simple Hedge Witches all the way back in 2nd edition. Had a big chat with a bunch of people over in a workshop about how best to do that. That was good fun. No, this map is made just for me, so I have somewhere to run my next game. No, totally understandable. And Yalin then finally adds, also, I just realized I have some notes with suggestions for part time. Whoops. I'll have to prepare those to start next stream. And if we can fit them in, we will. If we can't, we'll pop them somewhere else. So that all being said, thank you all so much for turning up and watching. If you're watching this later, do please pop over to our Discord where we're going to be continuing chatting about the various areas. I won't be doing that tonight because I'm going to go collapse somewhere. But over the course of the next few days, I most certainly will. I'm also role-playing tomorrow evening, so I won't be doing it tomorrow evening either. If you've enjoyed the streams, do remember to do that likey thing and do that ring bell thing to make sure you get notifications and subscribe to the channel so that you can get notifications for when we're doing our next videos. But other than that, thank you all so much for all your contributions. These streams just would not be the same without you turning up and adding all the cool extra ideas. And as I've said before, no idea is too stupid, no idea is too simple, because with all of us together, we can take anything and turn it hopefully into something much better as we build it together as a group. So thank you all so much. I will see you next time. I will be here next Thursday, lest I collapse ill, which hopefully won't happen again this year. And I intend to do this every single Thursday. So hopefully we will see you next week and the week after. Ad infinitum until eventually Kalegen is finished. Until then, sayonara. Bye-bye.